Good evening. We have all the commissioners we're expecting this evening, I believe. And it's just after 7, so I'd like to get the meeting underway and call this meeting to order. Lady, will you please take roll?
Thank you. Commissioner Harry Chomsky,
Present.
Commissioner Farid Javandel,
Present.
Commissioner Susan Reeves, present. Chair Ken McCroskey,
Present.
and Commissioner Robert Del Rosario is absent and excused.
So we have draft minutes from the January 25th meeting. Do we have any comments from the or corrections from the commissioners?
I'll move approval.
Susan is seconded. Yeah, you're on.
No.
Okay. All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Great. Right, so our first item on the agenda is public comment. And this is public comment for items that are not otherwise on the agenda this evening. Is anyone here for public comment, not related to the agenda items? Seeing none, we'll move along to the police report presentation, item number 5.1.
I'm sorry, but we don't have new data from the police department for this month, but we are working with the police chief and the other several other officers for a presentation either next month or the following month.
Great. Okay. That moves us right along to the heart of the evening, item number 6, with our 3 items for consideration. I just want to say that this commission is made up of appointees of the City Council, and we're asked to consider the safety and design of city streets and recommend to them our findings. If you have a problem with our decisions, you can take it up with the City Council. So this is not the last court of appeal. We have had recently some issues, so I just want to quickly go over the general flow of our meetings. In general, we start out with a presentation from staff on each item. We follow that with questions or maybe intersperse it with questions from the commissioners. Then the public is invited to speak and ask questions, give opinions. After that's over, those questions may be responded to by staff and the commissioners. At that point, the commissioners share their opinions and ask further questions, and then come to some sort of point where we either make a resolution or we continue the item. And that's the general flow. And then I invite you to participate in the public comment portion of that. With that, I'd like to turn it over to staff, or perhaps AC Transit as appropriate, for the first item, item number 6.1.
Yes, good evening. My name is Ann Hirsch. I'm the planning manager in the community development department, and I'm just going to quickly introduce Catherine Vo from AC Transit. So in community development, we received the application for the encroachment permit to relocate the bus stop at San Pablo and Solano, and Catherine is going to do a presentation on behalf of AC Transit detailing the relocation request.
Hello, I'm Catherine Vo. I am the transportation planner at AC Transit, and our request is to relocate the northbound San Pablo Avenue at Solano bus stop. So I'll go through existing conditions, recommendations, and then benefits, just as an outline. So currently, our AC Transit line 72R, which is the rapid, 72, 72M, 18G Transbay, and 800, which is a late night service, all serve the single stop. That's quite a bit of service. It's about a bus every 5 minutes, and in total, it's nearly 1,000 passengers just at this one stop. So this is actually Albany's highest ridership stop in the entire city. According to a 2013 AC Transit study, 80% of 72R buses arrived on a green light. That's great and awesome for rapid bus service, but our bus stop is on the near side. So even though we arrive on a green, we have to wait the cycle because our buses do frequently stop at this bus stop. As I said, it's Albany's highest ridership stop. Most buses waited an entire signal cycle, and that's between 1 minute and 15 seconds up to 2 minutes. So it depends when they hit that green and how long they have to wait for the next. And unfortunately, the current bus stop is shorter than what our standards show for a near-side bus stop. So we do have near-side bus stops. It's what's existing in the field. And this one is just extremely short for the amount of service at this location. So 50% of buses block travel lane due to insufficient curb space. So what that means is that the bus is physically nosed in to the bus stop with the tail out. We have to nose in to make sure that those who need the proper access, and we always want to have proper access to our bus stop, we nose in to make sure that at least the front door is able to access that. And then in this picture, it's a great illustration of some of the challenges that we're having at this particular location. The first bus is held up at the red light and is preventing the second bus and the car sandwiched in between, the unlucky car, doesn't allow the second bus to access the stop. So therefore, that bus, once it gets to the stop, may have to wait even longer. So these are some of our design guidelines. This is the existing condition. As I said, this is the bus that's being nosed in. It's not great for anyone. The stops are too short, bus blocks passing traffic, and as we've seen on San Pablo, that can back up to here, really. Bus blocks visibility between motorists and pedestrians, so if someone's waiting on that corner getting off the bus and they want to cross the street, it's not safe for them to do so in a lot of cases because sometimes cars are impatient and they want to make a right turn around the bus. Well, that is dangerous for pedestrians trying to cross Solano. This also makes it very difficult to board a wheelchair or a cane or a stroller and increases likelihood of red light delay. Now, this is a better condition. It's when we just have a longer curb so that our bus can fully pull in. But we still have some issues with visibility. So in terms of pedestrian safety, once our riders get off, they become pedestrians. So we need to make sure that they're all safe and can cross properly. Now, this is the even better condition. And this is what we're suggesting for this encroachment permit at this time. It requires less curb space on a far side because we're able to utilize the intersection to maneuver our buses into the proper curb space. It allows traffic to pass because now that we've pulled out properly, traffic can now zoom by. And it does not block visibility between motorists and pedestrians. And that is a huge, huge plus, especially at this intersection where you not only have a lot of motorists, you have a lot of pedestrians. And that's what we want to make sure is being cared for and that the sight lines are being the top of the list in priority. This also decreases the likelihood of red light delay. So if a bus gets to that near side corner on a green light, it's able to go through on that green light and then offboard passengers, which usually takes about 30 seconds. So that's really quick. But the downside to this is that buses still have to wait for cars to pass before re-entering traffic. Fortunately, it's a lot better than our current condition because this current cycle is 5 cycles, and our bus really only has to wait 1/5 of those cycles or up to 2/5. So instead of 1 minute and 50 seconds or 2 minutes, it's more like 45 seconds, which is pretty darn good for the amount of service coming through. And this is the best condition. As a transportation planner, I'm always trying to push what's best for everyone in terms of our riders and pedestrians and street usage. So this is an extension of the curb. So basically, you're blocking up the traffic in one lane so that cars behind don't pass, don't do anything really. It minimizes delay for transit, which is great because people can offboard quickly and be extremely visible because now they're in an offset curb. And it improves pedestrian flow and visibility and minimizes crossing distance in crosswalk. Recently, we did some curb usage counts, and this is kind of just this is just a quick flash look at it. We did morning, midday, and afternoon, and these are just for weekday. And we saw, which we kind of expected, is that buses account for 55% of curb usage throughout the day. And curb usage is the near side curb, is the bus zone. Behind the bus zone, even more south, is the queue zone, so where cars are backed up because buses are in the lane. And then the green zone is on the far side where we're proposing to relocate. We saw for queuing that the near side vehicle queues increased during the PM peak, and that congestion often backs up to Buchanan. And then the far side usage, it's fairly consistent throughout the day. But when you compare it to bus usage and number of people using the bus, that number gets even smaller because most of the green zone usage is single vehicle. And we also noticed that 8% of users exceeded the max time in the green zone, even though the parking in this area is not considered high need, high priority. It's about 80% is the highest, 60 to 80% occupancy in these zones.
Parking occupancy, yeah.
Yes.
Okay.
And that was a study by City of Albany. So our recommendation is to move to the far side where this green zone is, and this would be the first bus stop. Our 72s and 800s continue straight along San Pablo, but our 18 and Gs turn right onto Solano. So that's why we need 2 new bus stops in order to keep a bus stop for the 18 and G closest to San Pablo. Because like I said, this is a very high usage stop. And then this is the location for the 18 and G. And this is a great location because it has huge opportunity for placemaking. And if you've seen just upstream at Solano and Cornell, the first in the nation bus stop parklet, this location has some good vibes about it. So this isn't just a benefit to AC Transit. AC Transit serves the community. So really all of these benefits are for everyone. The first one, like I said, is increased pedestrian visibility. Second is reduced bus dwell time. That means a more reliable ride for our riders. 4, opportunity for placemaking along Solano. And 5, reduced vehicle queue and idling on San Pablo Ave. That's it, thank you.
Questions from the commission?
Yes.
I guess I'll go first. Can you go back to the multicolor bar chart? I didn't really understand what the bars were, what those numbers mean or what each
Okay.
color means. Can you explain that chart?
There are
a
a
little
number of sightings. So on the y-axis, it's the number of sightings per morning, midday, and afternoon. Those are the sections on the x-axis.
Sightings meaning,
Physical counts. So we went out there and we looked at both locations, and every time we saw someone go in location one, which
Okay.
was the green zone, we marked it. And we
so
marked
in the morning there were 17 buses that used the bus stop. Is that,
Is it only buses or is it cars and buses and,
what
So
is,
the bus zone, we're only counting buses.
okay.
okay, so the bluish bar just represents the number of buses that passed, that used the stop in each period of the day.
Correct.
Okay, and when it says buses account for 55% of curb usage, can you explain what that means?
Yes, so that's looking at the curb along the near side and the far side. And it's more to just give a spatial representation of what we were looking at. And when I say curb usage, it's broken up into the bus zone where the bus stop is, or maybe I should move north. So the Q zone is behind the bus stop, most south, so between Buchanan and Solano Avenue. And then the bus zone is right at our bus stop prior to Solano. And then the green zone is the far side after Solano Avenue at the intersection.
Okay,
And it's just in the northbound direction.
so I'm still not sure what it means to say buses account for 55% of curb usage.
So we're looking at, that is kind of confusing.
If one of you understands it, maybe you can
I'll
explain it.
I'll take a stab, and you can tell me if I'm correct in my interpretation. But taking the morning as an example, this would mean during the observation, 17 buses used the bus stop. At the same time, it looks like 13 cars used the green zone on the other side of the intersection.
So that green bar represents 13 different cars that were occupying the green zone at various times during the morning. Okay,
Yes. Thanks for clarifying.
okay. So when you say 55%, you're saying that the number of buses that used the bus stop is greater than the number of different cars that used the green zone.
Yes,
Okay, and the red bar isn't really a part of that particular statistic.
correct.
Okay, that's why it was confusing to me.
Correct, yeah, thank you.
Okay, so the red bar then represents what?
It represents the queue of cars behind the bus stop. So that is an issue more in terms of traffic. It does affect our
Yeah.
buses because they're 6-minute service, but it's mainly to illustrate that there are always queues, and the queues are greater than the usage on the far side, the green zone usage.
Yeah,
So if you're looking at trade-offs for should we move the bus stop to reduce these queues, this kind of illustrates that in a way.
So what does the height of the red bar mean? So like in the morning, the bar is up to 10. What is that saying?
That unfortunately means the number of individual cars queued up behind in the queue zone, and that's behind a bus.
So that's the length of the queue at its the longest that the queue, the longest length that the queue attained in the course of the morning, or the number of cars that got stuck
It's
in
the
it?
longest queue.
Okay.
Yeah.
So, I mean, there are different length queues at various times during the morning, but the longest one that you observed was 10 cars.
Correct.
Okay.
These are really good questions. Thank you.
Okay. All right. And the green bar reflects the number of different cars that parked at the green zone during that time. Okay. And in fact, just extrapolating, if we see that 17 buses stopped and 13 cars parked in the green zone, we can assume that of the 17 buses that stopped, maybe 20 or 30 people actually got on and off, whereas in the 13 cars that parked, there may have only been 15 people getting in and out.
Correct.
So it's even, so that's even, makes it an even greater discrepancy than what the chart shows. Is that correct?
Yes.
Okay.
Well, and you're not even mentioning how many people were on the bus without getting on or off.
True.
So passenger throughput. Yes.
So I have a question. When, if we were to move the bus stop to the north side, and they basically separate these bus stops, so if right now a bus stops every 5 minutes on San Pablo, what's the remaining buses that stay on San Pablo? What's kind of the time, how many? What's the breakout between the stops?
Let me quickly do this.
Yeah.
Well, I think of this, going back to, I forgot, sorry. So it's about 6 to 7 minutes. So our most frequent services are the 72s.
Okay.
Yeah. So we're just removing, the G is not even accounted in the 6 minutes because it has very different peak schedules, and to try and simplify that would have muddled everything.
Okay.
So yes, our fastest, most frequent service are the 72s and the 72R.
Great, thanks.
Does the 18 come approximately every 15 minutes?
Yes, the 18s every 15.
Okay.
When you showed a picture of a bus just a little bit behind another bus, if we moved is it likely that those are both 72s, or is it most likely?
No, one is an 18.
Okay, so by making the move you're suggesting, we would actually end up having those buses stop in different stops.
The 18.
They won't be competing for the same stop on the far side.
Correct. So
Okay.
once the 72 clears the intersection, the 18 has a free move to do a right turn.
Okay.
So it'll just basically push everything out, like Drano.
Does it ever happen that there are two 72s in quick succession? And the one in back doesn't really have a place to go? If there's a near side bus stop, the one in back just waits right behind it until it can move in. But if it's a far side, I'm not sure where the back bus would wait.
For the intersection.
Yeah, that's actually a really great question, and something that transportation planners are always fighting with. And it's called bus bunching. And that usually happens when a corridor isn't properly designed or managed, in some terms. And in this case, a lot of the bus bunching occurs because the traffic's not able to move through. So our bus will be held up, at Buchanan, and then the individual vehicles will choose to merge into the left lane to go straight. But if all of the queues were able to clear out, then our buses would be properly spaced.
So ideally, it wouldn't happen. But if it does happen, then the back bus has to wait behind the intersection.
It would hang behind the intersection
Okay.
to make sure that we're not in the intersection.
Okay. And I have another question about, you mentioned the danger to pedestrians at a near side stop. Do you have any statistics about that, either regarding this particular stop at this location? Have there been incidents that could be attributed to that problem, or do you have any general statistics nationwide about how dangerous a near side versus far side stop is?
I don't have them right now, but it is general practice, and it's applied in NACTO and nationwide design guidelines, that a far side stop allows sightlines. So it's more of an engineering problem to look at your sightlines and your daylighting. And so in terms of the physical space and geometry, and I think this image illustrates it well, you're physically not able to see
Yeah.
pedestrians at the corner.
I can understand the problem in theory. I was just wondering if there were any numbers about how it plays out in practice.
Well, in my previous life in transit, as a transit planner, I encountered a couple of statistics in Southern California and also in Contra Costa County, where there's been huge lawsuits because of exactly that same problem that Catherine is explaining. One intersection, signalized intersection in Southern California, and an unsignalized intersection, I think it was in Concord, if I remember correctly. There was the cars in a two. It was a four-lane corridor. There was a bus stop, and on the near side, a pedestrian was crossing in front of the bus stop, and cars that were next to the bus hit the pedestrian and left him paralyzed. So that was a huge lawsuit. So. The Los Angeles one I don't remember, but they have a couple of incidents, and that's the reason for these design guidelines.
Another question. With this recommendation, are you recommending any changes to the lighting sequence for that intersection to Caltrans, or?
Not in this particular encroachment permit request.
Okay.
I don't think you mentioned it, but something that I've seen in the past is buses stopping on the near side and then making a right turn have some difficulty because they're right adjacent to the curb. The rear wheels would tend to track over the corner unless they swing wide, and Solano doesn't seem that wide. Has that been an issue expressed by any of your drivers there on the 18?
Yes, but it's also unfortunate because they often nose in because they can't align with the curb.
Okay.
Good point, though. Thank you.
So I'm sorry, so that makes it worse because they can't get back out enough to swing out, is that correct? Or
Their rear wheels are already out, so that won't bump up on the curb, but it does make it an odd maneuver to kind of swiggle out and then back in.
Swingle? I like that.
that's a
Yeah, yeah.
traffic.
No, it's fine.
Flexibility.
I had a couple questions. Somebody spoke to expressed concern that if the 18 and G bus stop is moved to Kains and Solano, first of all, this is a near side stop, but it's not a signalized intersection. With the length of buses, is there a concern that the traffic might back up onto San Pablo? And has that been studied?
Yeah, I think that's a great question. It depends on what improvements can be made at the bus stop. So if we have a bulb out or something similar to at Cornell, then our buses stop for 30 seconds, which is faster than a car backing out. So that's one option. Another option is that our buses will pull into the bay and then pull out. And so we wouldn't impede traffic trying to pass.
Aleda, how long is the left turn southbound San Pablo to eastbound Solano? Do you happen to know that?
Left turn southbound San Pablo?
For example, if I was turning,
Yeah,
making
okay.
that turn, I wouldn't necessarily see the bus from San Pablo. I turn, or maybe I wasn't paying attention, I turned anyway. Is 30 seconds enough to allow those cars to clear out of the intersection?
Right, yeah, I think it's enough. The issue sometimes on San Pablo, it's very congested, and the QE on the left turn but it's independent. It's because there's traffic on San Pablo. But the buses actually, and the advantage of that intersection at Kains, are you talking about the Kains and Adams intersection, is that there's no signal, so the buses can just go in
Proceed whenever.
20, 30 seconds. They just clear that bus stop, and there's no backup. That's the way I see it. And that's basically I was one of the people observing the bus stop at that intersection, that the statistics that Catherine brought up. And then the buses, I mean, it's just loading and unloading passengers, and then they go. They get stuck at the signal when it's red.
Okay.
But if it's no red signal, those buses would clear the intersection very fast.
Okay. We received a letter that suggested that it would be better to move the bus stop to the south. Do you have any information about where the demand in the local area and where people are coming to or heading from?
Clarifying question, what do you mean by to the south?
Right. So the writer suggested that instead of creating 2 new bus stops and eliminating the current bus stop, eliminate the current bus stop and move both stops further south on San Pablo.
We currently have a bus stop further south on San Pablo at Buchanan, and that stop doesn't have as high ridership as this stop. So in terms of Albany's usage, this has priority, I would say, in terms of bus. And splitting,
So you're saying you see the demand at Solano?
yes, there's huge demand. I mean, when I go to meetings here, this connection is the only connection I can take. And I think that's for a lot of people who live in this corridor in Albany, that this is like the major hub and connection for them to get anywhere they need to.
Okay, thank you. You mentioned something in passing on the data, and you said something about green zone overstays. Could you extrapolate a little more on that?
Yes, so we wanted to see if the issue of the green zones is that there's not enough space or that it's being used too much and that people aren't actually able to use it, or what is the usage of it. And we saw that throughout the day there were violators, even though that there were 90-minute parkings available on either side of Solano. And so that kind of shows that 1 or 2 people per car are overusing this public space, where we have, you know, on our lines, these particular lines at this stop, we get about 4,000 passengers per day total. So that's 4,000 butts being held up and not being able to go through because of the queuing and because of the violation in the green zone. So it's kind of, it was to illustrate the trade-offs between number of people or being able to properly use the space.
Okay.
Is it 4,000 or 1,000 daily?
So it's 1,000 daily at this one stop.
Okay,
This is what I remember that I wanted to say.
okay.
1,000 daily at this stop, but in terms of passenger throughput, it's nearly 4,000 because these are very major arterial lines.
So it's 1,000 people getting on or off, but 4,000 people that might be staying on the bus.
Correct.
Oh, okay. Got it.
Great.
That's helpful.
My last question for now is, and it's probably both for staff and AC Transit, is I understand that the plan is to move the green zones further up the block. So create a red zone for the bus stop and follow that with green zone. Has it been considered moving the bus stop further up the block and leaving the green zones where they are now?
Again, I think that goes back to connectivity and bus stop usage. And this is a prime location for people to access Solano and all its businesses. So it helps with the local economy, and it also helps with people getting to where they need to go. And moving it further up, further north, would kind of reduce that demand in a way. And I'm sure Aleda can say more on that.
I remember in 2014, we discussed actually moving it 1/3 north. But again, I don't exactly recall why. There was no support as well, so at that time. So we needed a bulb out too, so I don't know if that was the money, the funding issue was. In this case, which is close to the intersection, we can do it without the bulb out and have the bulb out later. So.
Yes, and also this is a signalized intersection, so it's great for pedestrians to cross.
Oh, right, and I remember from the previous discussion, if you have the bus stop further up, then it creates a demand for pedestrians to cross at the bus stop,
Correct.
which would be dangerous. Okay, thank you.
Thank you.
Any further questions from the commission? Staff, do you-
Comment, yeah.
Please.
So just to remind you that the next item, there was a specific request to move all the bus stops along San Pablo Avenue from the near side to the far side whenever feasible. So there might be some that might not be feasible, but that's the pattern throughout the corridor.
Okay.
Ready. Thank you.
Thank you. All right, so this is the public comment portion. How many people are interested in speaking on this issue this evening? Great. I think we're going to go with the full 3 minutes. If you could, please, for the purpose of our minutes, fill out one of the little cards. And we'll just do it fairly randomly or casually. I'll have you line up and take turns using the podium. We'll give you about 3 minutes, and you're welcome to turn in your cards at any time.
Good evening. My name's James Silva. I own the stained glass shop where this bus stop is proposed to be moved in front of. There's really kind of 3 things I want to touch on. One, I and my neighboring businesses try very hard to present a attractive, family-friendly environment from our storefronts, the sidewalks. We make an effort to make a good impression on our visitors, our customers, and so forth. If you haven't noticed, AC Transit's bus stops are the exact opposite. They are filthy, they are gross, they are not maintained at all. So when AC Transit talks about moving a bus stop, that's where they're sort of hands off. They don't clean them, they don't do anything, they don't maintain them at all. So that becomes a burden to us business owners. Frankly, it impacts our business. I have a stained glass shop, beautiful stained glass windows in my storefront. To have a bus every 5 minutes parked in front of that with a bus stop in front of it really is going to impact my business. Second, parking. It was mentioned that it's not particularly important or high priority. I've gotten 14 parking tickets in the last 5 years because I work 12 hours a day, 6 days a week on San Pablo. There is no parking. There is no long-term parking. It's 90-minute parking. That's what these are. I don't know if this committee knows this, but at least 7 parking spots have been removed from the corner of Kains and Washington in the last year and a half because they painted the corners red and they took out parking spots. We're talking about removing even more. I have customers that are bringing stained glass windows in. Not something you're going to carry on a bus, and certainly not something you're going to carry up the street. That 20-minute parking is essential for my customers, as well as for my neighboring businesses. There are half dozen restaurants where their clients come to pick up their meals. That 20-minute parking, as you saw in the graph, it's very consistent. It's used all day long for people picking up meals, for people going to the corner market, my customers picking up. It's vital, okay? But this is traffic and safety. So the biggest issue, and I don't know if anyone noticed, but this graph, San Pablo's 2 lanes. Even this graph is inaccurate. You can't trust anything that's been presented because something as simple as how many lanes are on San Pablo. This is not what it looks like. Left-hand turn with a bus here, right-hand turn with a bus here. Solano's going to back up. You're going to have the same issues. This doesn't make any sense. So I hope you will finally end this. Thank you.
Thanks for your input.
Do you read this? My name is Sangeeta Gurcha, and I'm one of the co-owners of Max's Liquors. And I want to start by saying that the parking that you guys are trying to remove by moving the bus stop to the far side of the street is the lifeline for all our small businesses. My business and my neighbors' businesses, they rely on that parking. That's all the parking we have. If you see, I don't know how much you guys know, but I pretty much call every single day to the police station, checking if the parking enforcement is there, because the parking is full all the time. We use that parking to unload our stuff. We get deliveries. I got 18-wheelers delivering my stuff. I have my customers that use that parking. If that parking is not there, there's not gonna be any business. And I request to you guys, you are the only people I can say this to, because I live in this city. I've been living here for past 25 plus years. I need your help. Small businesses rely on that parking, and if that parking is not there, there's not gonna be any business. Throughout the day when the parking is taken, I invite any of you to please come sit by me at my store and see how many customers I get. None. My cash register goes on a sleeping mode because no parking means no customers. And like James said before, right now, AC Transit is backing up the traffic only on one side. If you move the bus stop over here where my store is and where James' store is, now you're gonna deal with traffic coming down Solano from the left side, from the right side, and from that side. And with 18-wheelers parked there for 5 days a week because I'm getting my deliveries, good luck with that traffic going anywhere at all. And the other thing I want to mention is I think one of my customers previously, she was here and she presented some statistics to you guys that liquor stores and bus stops, in front of one another, that's going to probably increase crime. We're already dealing with, homeless issues and people coming in and threatening us. And I almost got hit by a homeless person because I told him to leave and he was refusing to leave. And you're going to put a parkette or maybe a bus stop in front of the liquor store, that's not going to go very well. So I really don't know. This is my plea to you guys. Please, this has been going on for too long, and we are fed up with this. We just need that parking. That's the bottom line. I really don't know what else to say to you guys. But I think the city should really think about the small businesses that are inside that city instead of giving priority to any AC Transit or any transportation service. So thank you so much for your time. Thank you.
Thank you.
Oh, and I also wanted to give this letter. This is from one of the other business owners who use that parking. Thank you.
All right.
Hi, thanks for this opportunity to speak. I am the new kid on the block. My name is Amy Moore, and I own a women's consignment boutique at 863 San Pablo. I moved in January, and I'm here not only to support my business, but my neighbors. The reception that I have received from my neighboring merchants, as well as the community, has been overwhelming and very positive. I get comments on a daily basis. You are so needed. We welcome you. We are so happy that you're here. We love what you're doing. This neighborhood needs you. My neighbors are amazing, and my interaction with them was a big reason why I chose this space. I myself, just in the past 8 weeks, have experienced aggressive behavior from pedestrians, people intoxicated, and on a particular afternoon, had to lock my door out of fear from an aggressive person passing by. So, and I'm often there in the evening because I'm a one-woman show, and I work so hard and have invested so much money and time and effort into my small homegrown business. Another thing I would like to say is I keep seeing and hearing all this buy local, and I would love for you to be advocates for that movement, like we are. So I would really appreciate your support. Thank you.
Thank you.
Thank you. Hi, my name's Aaron Priven, and I want to be upfront. My day job is with AC Transit, but I didn't know about this until I got the postcard in the mail. I live on Stanage between Solano and Washington, and I've been frustrated at the stop. I take the bus all the time, and because of course I do that. I moved to this part of Albany because of the transit accessibility. And I've been stuck in this stop for a long time, waiting to go through it, trying to get off. Because I live in this neighborhood, I patronize the local businesses. I don't do it with a car. I walk there. So I just wanted to say that as a local resident, I do support moving the stops to places where that'll be better for transit. And as someone who's lived here for 9 years, I just think it's really important. Thank you.
Thank you.
Hi, I'm Mary Talia. I'm the executive director of the Albany Y, and I actually have questions. Can I ask questions?
We'll wait till the end to answer them, but yes, of course.
May not get an answer. So I have a question about the bus that's going to be turning up Solano Avenue. Is it a long extended bus, or is it generally just a regular size bus, the one that goes up?
So ask your questions and we'll answer them.
Oh, you want all the questions at once? Okay. Is that bus also tied to the idea of a parklet? Does there have to be a parklet there? I have concern about a bus stopping in the middle of the street as opposed to pulling in. We have a lot of pedestrians, a lot of older people crossing at that crosswalk. There's not a stop. So people stop driving when they see a person in the crosswalk usually. So that was a question about that. And then obviously the loss of parking spaces is always a concern for us. We rely on people mostly driving. We really encourage bike riding as well as pedestrian activity a lot. But again, that area will be a loss of parking. So here's another question: is what will happen to the existing bus stop that's on San Pablo? Will that be turned into parking? Will it be green parking, or will it be 90-minute like the rest of Albany? So those are my questions.
Mary, can I ask you a qualifying question? Maybe it was because I was writing something down, but when your question about pedestrians and stopping, non-stopping, what's your concern there?
So my concern is that if the bus is stopping in the middle of the street, oftentimes I'm concerned about people going around the bus. There are a lot of people crossing over because parking is so impacted in the neighborhood that they're, parking up Kains, on the north side of Kains. So it's really just a matter of, navigating that area right there.
Right, I think we can answer that.
Okay.
Thank you.
All right, thank you.
Good evening.
My name is Chris Cole. I am the attorney for the owner of the property on the north side of this intersection. And I've been coming here since 2002 when this proposal was actually first made, to my knowledge. And the proposal was denied in 2002, and it was denied again in 2013. And I recognize, I think, at least two of the commissioners from 2013 when this proposal was denied. And the reason it was denied were the reasons that you've heard already, and I'm not going to repeat. about the parking being needed for the viability of these small businesses. And one of the comments, I think, from the commissioners in 2013 I wrote down was that transit first doesn't mean transit only, and we have to support our local businesses. There is no access to these businesses on the north side. There is no access from the back. There's no access from the side. The only access to these businesses for suppliers is from the front. And if you take away these green zone, they're not going to be able to receive their goods, and they're not going to be able to have people stop and bring in their stained glass. I'd also like to bring up something from 2002 that I think should be considered and was discussed a little bit during the presentation. And in 2002, the president of the Chamber of Commerce was from Mechanics Bank. And he stood here and said the same things I said about supporting local business and parking being so important on this side of the street in San Pablo. And he said he would be happy to have the bus stop in front of Mechanics Bank, which is only 1 block north of this intersection. And I also point out that half a block up from this intersection at San Pablo and Solano is another parking lot, a smaller parking lot that serves a florist and I think another business that's a little farther north. The bus stop could be put there, and it would not interfere with anybody's business at all because it is a parking lot. And you're talking about half a block that a pedestrian would have to then walk from this smallish parking lot down to the corner of San Pablo and Solano. That is a good location for this. It allows for the pulling in, it allows for all the things that the presenter said, and does not in any way interfere with these small businesses and their parking. So I think that's something that should be considered, and it should have been at least part of the presentation. Apparently it was not even considered, and perhaps the commission would want to continue this hearing so that some thought could be done and maybe a site visit made. Thank you.
Thank you.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Edwin Kains, and I was the previous owner for the Max's Liquor. I owned this place almost 10 years, from 1992 until 2002. So I attended 2 hearings. One was in 2002 and 2013. So I'm here to support small businesses. I understand that the reporting which they have is not accurate. So saving 30 seconds, I think it will not make a big sense. And the small owners are here for a long time, and they're here to support their families. And I think moving the bus stop to the new location will not make a sense. So I strongly recommend, just like the other councilmen recommend in 2002, 2013, so they did not approve that location. So I'm here again to support our community, so please do not recommend the new location because it's nothing but losing the business for the small business. So that's all I'm requesting today. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
My name is Vikas Garcha. I'm the co-owner of Max's Liquors. This green zone, we almost have like around 500 customers a day. 80% of the people, they use this green zone just for Max's Liquors only, And then you can see all, as my, neighbor pointed out that, this green zone is not used by our businesses. It's used by, a lot of them, to pick up the meals, to do other things. So this zone is occupied, all the time for a short amount of time, 5 minutes, 10 minutes, customer flow is there. So 80% of our customers who come, and then they use this zone. And a lot of people, a lot of the time, evening time, even this green zone, fills up with like all the handicap parking because we cannot do anything. The 20-minute zone doesn't apply to them. So if you see on the evenings, Friday, Saturday, Thursday, all this one after 5 o'clock to 9 o'clock is all filled up. And then my customers, sometimes they come, oh, I came here, yesterday there was no parking. I just went to another store. I just went to, another location. There was no parking. I'm so sorry about that. Then I tell them that this is the problem we have all the time. So this, I hear it from all the customers, If I don't have this parking, then, this business will not, live that long also. Because if we lose, little bit like sale, if we lose like 20% of the sale because of the parking, our expense is going to stay same. And then by losing losing all the sale, this sale from not having the parking, and our expense will stay same. So this, whatever profit we're going to making right now we won't be able to make any money after that. So this is we have been doing this from long time. It's been really stressful for us also, me, my wife, whole family also. That this is and another thing is that you can check with the City of Albany Police that how many times a day we call that this zone is occupied by any other vehicle, and then they come and issue tickets also. So this is a common problem. I just request you guys to just consider our plea that not to move this bus stop in front of the Max's Liquors or in the near neighborhood. Thank you.
If I could ask a question?
Yes, please.
Just regarding the parking enforcement, if someone's in the green zone for too long, you call for enforcement. Does PD have to chalk the tires and wait?
That's right. They chalk the tire, and then they come back after 20 minutes, then they issue tickets.
Okay, thank you.
Is there anyone else who wishes to make public comment on this issue? We were handed the letter. I want to note that the manager of the Japanese restaurant close to the corner also wishes to register his opinion against the parking, the bus stop movement, the bus stop change. I wrote down a bunch of questions that Mary had. Perhaps I could get staff and AC Transit to address those. So one of her questions was, of the lines that run on Solano, what are the bus lengths?
Those will be 40 footers for the 18, and it's our MCI or our Transbay bus for the G, which is 42 feet.
42. So these aren't the extended
No, those are
accordion
only
buses.
on San Pablo for the 800, which is our late night service.
Okay, thank you. So one of Mary's questions was about loss of parking, and I think it was clear to me from the presentation that the bus stop on San Pablo currently, the current location would be converted to parking, and it would become how many spots?
From the south side?
Yep.
About 2.
Okay,
2 or 3?
2 or 3.
3.
So we're not quite sure. And
We
I
have to
think
evaluate the red zone before the crosswalk. That's why we're not sure between.
understood. And the parklet plans haven't been fleshed out, so we're not certain how many parking spaces might eventually be eliminated on Solano.
And if I may add to that, they're independent decisions, so that whether or not the commission would want to go forward with the parklet can be, you can move the bus stop without a parklet.
Right. It was my impression that we weren't going to be addressing that this evening from your staff
That's correct. We
recommendation.
don't have anything to show you on that yet.
Great. So we're tabling that for later. And then there was a question about where the buses are stopping on Solano and the safety of the crosswalks, I believe. Right. Do you want to address that?
Yes, so it would be stopping on the near side of Kains, which in what I said before, our bus would be pulling into the bay. so it wouldn't hold up traffic in that event. And so after that, as our riders become pedestrians, it's the normal traffic or pedestrian flow as current.
But that intersection does not have a stop sign. Does that matter? How often do you have a bus stop without a stop sign?
It's always the preference to have a stop sign. In this case, there are definite trade-offs in trying to figure out where to place this 18 and G portion. And at this location, since we are pulling into the bay, that allows for the proper sight lines. And that's our biggest concern when we're looking at crosswalks.
Thank you. And Mary, I think your last question was about the parklet, and we're not going to address that this evening. Anything further from staff? Okay. Commissioners?
I wonder if you could explain some of the dimensions on in front of Max's in that area. So how the current green zone accommodates 3 cars, is that right? 4.
3 or 4?
3 or 4? 3. And then is the red zone for the bus stop anticipated to be the same length as the current green zone? Or longer or shorter?
Right. You're requesting 60 feet, is that right? Or 80? 80 plus...
Yes, we requested 80 feet because again, the 800 bus, which is the late night bus, is an articulated bus, and that's 60 feet. And we need, technically it could be 75 because we need 10 feet to pull out, and we need 5 feet from the crosswalk.
May I ask where we're planning on putting the bus stop at? It's not in front of the liquor store, it's in front of the pie shop.
Sir, we're not actually taking questions from the floor right now. We'll be discussing that, I think.
So is the proposed red zone for the bus stop the same length as the current green zone, or longer or shorter?
It's going to be longer.
Longer. Okay, and the green zone would then move to the north of that, and it would still be the same length that it is now, three cars worth. And do you know which store would, the boundary between the red and green zone would be in front of which storefront? Do you know? Because
It's going to be there's a florist there and then restaurant. Most likely it's going to be in, the green zone will be.
the Albany Florist and Gifts, is that right?
Jeff, are you trying to show us something?
Yeah. I'm trying to bring up a Google
Okay.
Earth.
Good. That's helpful, yeah.
This is the Solano intersections, that's the beginning of the green zone, and then this area is the end of the current green zone.
Okay. And is the shop directly above your cursor right now the glass shop?
That's correct.
Okay. And the clothing shop that we heard from is north of them? In the middle, okay. And the Japanese restaurant is around the corner, okay. So in the proposed configuration, the red zone would extend a little bit to the left of what we see now, like around.
Length.
But maybe, like, can you point to where the north edge of the red zone would be approximately? So we get a visual on that? Somewhere around there, okay. The north edge, where the red zone changes to green zone, would be, well, that's where the green zone ends now.
Right, the green zone ends right there where the
Right,
cursor
so
is.
in the proposed configuration, where would the red zone end and green zone begin?
Will be about, the four leaves, by the four leaves, you see that, no, this one, around here.
No, that's shortening it.
But we we are, 75, you said.
Yes,
The one that red car places.
it would actually be about right here
The red zone?
for the red zone. Yeah.
Okay.
Because it's that, we need that 5 feet from the crosswalk. So it would just be in the middle of that corner.
So as far as the glass store is concerned, the distance from a car parked in the green zone to the entrance of the glass store in the proposed configuration would be just maybe 10 feet more than it is now, but not significantly more than it is now. Is that right? So it looks like the south end of the green zone is very close to the storefront of the glass store. And right now, the north end of the green zone is in front of the glass store. So, okay. Okay, glad.
From last time, I think it was going to be where the green is going to be red, and then we moved the green north.
North, okay. And are there more businesses to the north of there in where the green zone's being added that are like restaurants with takeout customers and things like that? So, I mean, we didn't hear from people who own businesses to the north of the glass store, but we heard some comments on their behalf. It sounded like some people in the public were saying that they would be harmed by having this change, but it seems like they would have, those restaurants to the north of the glass store would have a green zone directly in front of them now, which they don't currently have. Is that right? Right. Okay.
Farida's doing a statistical analysis. Susan, do you have any questions or comments?
Not offhand, no.
Okay. I'll let you continue on, if I may. So currently, are there 3 lanes westbound on Solano at San Pablo? There's like a right turn lane, a through lane, and a left turn lane. Okay, so one of the things we heard tonight, and that I've heard before, is that they currently have problems taking deliveries in this area. Would it be possible to make the right turn lane double as a delivery loading zone? Take the delivery truck off San Pablo, away from the bus stop, so there's not a conflict there.
The right turn lane on San Pablo?
On Solano.
I'm sorry, on Solano?
Westbound.
Well, one thing I have to say is that we need to conduct counts of the right turn movement at that intersection and see how they will, because the other thing, it would be good to have the deliveries and the time of delivery and make it, maybe doing it by time of day. But if deliveries are done throughout the day for those businesses, then that's an impact for the vehicle traffic operations of the intersection. We will need to conduct counts, and we haven't done that right now. Last time, we proposed to have a green zone there, which basically to create a green zone on that area. It would be east of the right turn lane, so the traffic operations would not be impacted.
Okay.
Maybe that's the next step to do, just count right turns. Just to, if this commission would like to recommend that.
All right. Let's keep that in mind. I remember reading something about how if this bus stop is created on the north side, that AC Transit won't be erecting any kind of structure. Is that correct?
Bus stop.
Shelter.
Bus stop.
Shelter.
I can speak to that. So our bus shelters are actually owned and maintained by Clear Channel, and they do add shelters. And our contract with them is sunsetting in the fall of 2019. And so our proposal for this specific location would be to remove the bus shelter, and we're not proposing to have a bus shelter on the far side, on the north side.
Would there be seating? Would there be a garbage can? What?
We're not planning to put in anything. We could work with the city if garbage cans is something that they'd like. And if there's a need for a bus bench, we would see if it's even able to be there because...
Space-wise?
Yes, space-wise. The space on the north side is different than on the current south side.
Did I understand right that you're planning to remove the shelter regardless of whether the stop gets moved?
No, if the stop moves, we'll remove the shelter.
Okay. But if the stop stays where it is, the shelter would remain in place and it just wouldn't be an advertising zone anymore?
Yes.
So it wouldn't
most
really
likely.
be maintained?
We are looking into another advertising contract. So we're not
Okay.
just abandoning them. We're switching providers because of the maintenance issues.
Okay, but you wouldn't expect to ask your new provider to set up a location on the north side?
That is correct. I also don't believe, like, looking at the geometry of the storefronts, we wouldn't want to put a bus shelter there. It kind of wouldn't make sense, and there's not enough room for ADA access, most likely.
Okay.
Okay. So I think one of the things that we've seen is that in 2002, I think it was, we actually moved the southbound bus stop on San Pablo in front of Subway, who also was opposed to the relocation. I don't think we've heard anything negative from them since that happened, and I get that it's a different business, but certainly my experience riding that bus, say coming from El Cerrito Plaza Bart, is it works really well, doesn't get held up. Driving there, turning right on Solano, not very hard. So as a model, that seems okay. One of the odd things we did there was to allow parking in the right turn lane, and for the most part, okay. It's got its pros and cons as we would have expected.
Time of day thing, right?
It is. But I do like the idea of westbound Solano trying to set up a loading zone. I think rather than green zone, yellow zone may be the thing to do there if we want it to be for loading purposes. So that, again, that could be posted time of day, before noon or something, whatever, a little bit of, thought into what times work and when the businesses take their deliveries would be important to figure that out. I do like the idea of, relocating the green zones for the north. We're not losing them. I think it's critical not to lose the green zones. And the questions, comments that I'm hearing lead me to ask whether we should have more green zones. So increase the number of green spaces on San Pablo. That probably needs consideration from the businesses because some of them do want longer-term parking, some shorter, maybe some green zones further up the block by the florist. Something to increase the total capacity there makes sense. The other thing that makes enforcement of the meter or the green zones easier would be meters, which we don't have. So that would be something we'd have to contract, and that'd be costly, harder than increasing the green zones. But again, I think that's something that's worth considering. Us sitting here just arbitrarily deciding more green zones is the answer, I don't think we can do that. But there is a concern, and we need to understand what maybe a poll of the businesses to see what their needs are, number of green zones, number of parking spaces, to try to manage that. I think that there's been no question. The reason this keeps coming back to us is that it continues to be a problem operationally. We're impacting 4,000 riders a day, 1,000 that are getting on and off right here, and all the traffic on San Pablo, which that's a huge number of people. If we look at the considerations, there's the transportation impacts, there's the business impacts, and then there's the safety impacts. And really, for me, the safety is the number one. Between the other two, it's a question of degrees. Larger number of people using the corridor for transportation, but the businesses, have the potential to be more significantly impacted, depending on what's done and if it's not done well. The southbound side of San Pablo seems to be doing fine. And again, I think we acknowledge those are different businesses. To the Solano relocation, I would really like to see something more comprehensive in terms of mapping it out. I think the San Pablo frontage should all be mapped out as well, so it's clear, relative to which storefront is the bus stop sign going to be in front of, which, where the green zone's going to be, so that people aren't left guessing. And in particular, council should not be left guessing. I think showing them a clear map would really help the discussion.
One of those.
On Solano, I see a couple different options. The comment I heard was that the bus would stop in the bay, which from a safety perspective really addressed the big concern that I was going to raise. Because if it's all the way over to the curb, the bulb out sticks out farther than the bus. So pedestrians will not be obstructed from sight stepping out. That's kind of important to me, because the other option was if we do anything like a narrow parklet there, you could have the bus stop and cars could still get around. And for me, that would be the worst possible case, because then we create exactly the scenario that in Catherine's slides, the sample intersection drawings showed as undesirable. If we do a full parklet so the bus is squarely blocking the traffic lane, that's great for safety, least impact for parking, but traffic flow becomes a little bit of an issue. And my observation there has been that we've got pedestrians crossing all the time anyway. So that traffic flow interruption happens. You get the eastbound green light, people cross, the first car comes up to a pedestrian, yields to them, and sometimes traffic backs up and people have to wait on the other side of the intersection. It hasn't, in my observation, been something that created gridlock. People manage. It's been working okay. So I don't see the bus as potentially being significantly different from that. I feel like it's more of the same. What I think is worth considering, and this will be a reason to perhaps wait for a little bit more work before proceeding, is move the bus stop east of Kains. Get a far side bus stop there. At that point, you're either going to give up a lot of parking spaces to get a curbside bus stop, or you're going to have to do a parklet or a bus bulb, something to get the bus either in the lane or halfway over, which far side of the intersection, either one of those would work. But I'd really like to see some layout design, because I see in my mind, and I've sketched up 5 different locations that the bus could end. The bus stop could be on Solano, and some of them are great for safety, not so good for parking. So it's safety, parking loss, traffic flow are the 3 criteria that I was trying to gauge this against. And while there's not a clear winner, the safety ones stand out to me as better, and those tend to be on the east side of Kains, and I'm sure that the Y would be interested in knowing what's happening to parking supply. So I guess my general sense is that while I definitely see some value in moving ahead, and there are concerns, I don't know that we want to move ahead until we have a more concrete plan for what to do.
I have a question. So a yellow zone, would that be for deliveries? Could it also be used for rideshare pickup and drop off?
Yeah, yellow zone legally is for loading and unloading of goods or people. So it functions as a white zone as well as a commercial loading zone.
Is it only a commercial pickup and drop off, or can anybody?
No, anyone can pick up or drop off passengers. So someone wants to catch an Uber or Lyft, or drop off their passenger who wants to walk to the movie theater, whatever. That's allowable within a yellow zone. But in order to stop and load or unload goods and actually leave the vehicle, you have to be a commercial vehicle.
So are you talking about a yellow zone behind the right turn lane, so we don't need to worry about the operations?
I think ideally that would be better. Now that would be, again, giving up parking spaces. So it's that question of, do we want to give up a couple of parking spaces that are there, which are the only ones on the block, or do we want to make the right turn lane be a dual purpose lane?
Right. So then it would be good to have that data of the right turn vehicles, the number of right turn vehicles in peak hour, and then make a decision after that.
Yeah, especially if we can break down the number of right turns by time of day and see if there's some window of time during the day when there are not too many.
I'd be interested in knowing how much pickup and drop-off occurs now and where in that general area. I observed some in the bus stop in front of the theater on a Sunday morning.
Yeah. So I guess my bottom line is that I don't want to make more work for the sake of making more work, but I do think that the goal is good, but the details have to be worked out so that we can make a recommendation to council that's meaningful and that council can, act on it with full information.
Was the far side of Kains considered for any, was there a reason on?
No, well, I'm just going to respond to that. The reason the Kains, let's see, southeast side of Kains and Solano was considered is that there was an interest in creating a parklet. And there is a willingness of hosting the parklet by the businesses that are on that side. So it's basically the synergy. We didn't explore the far side mainly because there were not like restaurants or eateries, something that will be conducive of sitting outside and enjoy a coffee or an ice cream.
Right.
Not that it's far away, but it's just right there, so immediate to the business.
Yeah.
So, Fareed, I think you said that one option would be to have sort of a mini parklet and allow cars to proceed around, which would be unsafe.
Correct. I would not support that one.
I understand.
So of
I'm
the
not
five,
suggesting that.
that's the one that I would just write off immediately and say, don't even pursue it.
Right. Okay. But having a full parklet would block the lane.
Correct.
I'm just trying to think fluidly. The opposite side of the street, the bus stop is only sort of partially in the lane, and cars can go around.
But it's far side.
And it's far
So
side.
the crosswalk's behind it, so it's not a safety problem.
Yeah, yeah.
So the same thing would hold true on the far side of Kains going up Solano, that it wouldn't matter whether it was a full lane blockage or a partial parklet. I think there again, it would be safe just as it is in front of the theater because it's past the crosswalk. But before the crosswalk completely changes that.
Great. The hamsters are turning. Thank you. Just trying to work through that. Another thing we heard expressed tonight was that handicapped vehicles are parked in the green zone. Where's the nearest handicap space? And how many are there? Or in that area? Maybe that's not a question for tonight.
Yeah, I don't think there is a handicap space on San Pablo Avenue. The nearest would be the one that you processed by the Carrick.
Up at Washington.
By Washington, yeah.
Yeah, that's quite a distance.
Right.
So something else to throw into the pot.
So our newest parklet, or our newest bus stop, first in the nation parklet, that's on the near side of that intersection, correct? And how is it performing? I don't know.
My observations are no complaints. It's performing very well. And then we're adding, remember when we processed that design here, there was a request to add bollards in the center lane, so cars would be precluding from
Crossing around.
crossing. So we're going to do that. It's not done yet, but we just received the bollards.
Well, the opening isn't until Sunday.
We might not be able to put them in
Fair
center
enough.
lane by Sunday, but they're there.
But at least it's the full lane blockage by the bus. So from that perspective, there's no legal maneuver that puts pedestrians at risk.
Again, it's a whole lane, and that's what the preference is for the bus to block the lane of the traffic.
So the objection that you posed was to something different. which is not what we've seen
Right.
at
So
Mr. Dewey's.
Yeah, as long as it's a full lane blockage, I'm okay with it. Or if it's all the way against the curb, I'm okay with it. But I acknowledge that that's going to have the greatest parking impact, which is not desirable on Solano. And facing the reality that unless it's, 1 a.m., I never drive up Solano without getting obstructed by pedestrians or parking maneuvers anyway. So blockage to me on Solano is a given. It's happening already. Adding one more hardly seems consequential in the greater scheme of things.
So the full-size parklet is
That's the better way to go.
Wait, okay, the right hamster came around to the right spot on the wheel. So the question I had was, given that on the far side, on the north side, the bus currently stops against the curb, there's room for traffic to go, could you shift the center line, have a full-size parklet, and allow passage on the south, conceptually?
Well, that's the thing. The full-size parklet there would be to prevent cars from going around the bus that is stopped.
Well, you said you were okay if the bus was pulled far enough to the curb that cars could get past.
Right, but that's based on the concept that now the bulb out extends further out than the bus. So a pedestrian walking in front of the bus is on the bulb out.
Right, and
Until
the
they get
parklet does
past
not
the
have a
bus.
bulb out further out.
Right.
Thank you, got it.
It's just the last thing you want is a pedestrian stepping out from in front of a bus directly into a traffic lane. If they've got even 4 feet of protected area that extends beyond the edge of the bus or the visual obstruction, there's reaction time and it's much safer. If you remove that and it's a zero separation between the lane and the bus, that's the worst possible scenario.
Okay, thank you. Further comments? It sounds like we're interested in sending this back to staff. Is that a general consensus?
Yes.
Right. So I'd be happy to make a motion that we ask staff and AC Transit to return with some conceptual schematics of the proposed configurations and recommendations for mitigation.
I can second that.
Would you want to flesh that out a little more, or you just want to leave that general? You don't want to put in the yellow zone?
Well, yeah, and I think things to consider would be adding a yellow zone on Solano, consulting the businesses on San Pablo about the desired mix of green zones, 90-minute zones, and possible accessible parking, handicap parking.
Can we make it specific to the east side of Solano?
Yes,
In that one block?
the east side of San Pablo,
San Pablo, thank you.
in the block north of Solano.
If I may, just to clarify that we would like to bring this back to you at the next meeting, which is March 22nd, and continue, what we would consider as a continuation of this discussion, and that saves us the sending out another postcard. So people who are interested in it, need to members of the public or people who might be watching, we would just continue this conversation to the commission meeting on March 22nd without mailing a new public notice.
Okay.
Can I get a second for that? Is anybody?
I'd like to second that motion.
Okay. Any further discussion? All in favor?
Actually, can
Oh, yeah, please.
can someone just read the motion as it stands so we know it was stated in
Fair
a
enough.
complicated way?
Okay, yes. Farid Javandel move to ask staff and AC Transit to return with schematics for the proposed bus stop, considering adding a yellow zone on the north side of Solano, consult with the businesses on San Pablo about the mix of green space and regular space, and considering I think I already said the yellow zone in Solano. Is that right?
Yeah, just adding in that in addition to green space and regular space, whether there's interest in a handicap space.
Whether it's an instance, okay, yeah.
Do we also want to see more detail about the Solano and Kains stop?
Right, and that's what's intended within the schematics.
But
to show what the layout
But
would
the
be.
Solano, we don't have any designs for the,
Right, so recognizing
to see
that there's
what-
not a current plan for a bulb out, what would be the interim treatment,
Oh,
which
I
may
see.
be curbside, and that's okay.
okay, that's, okay, adding that.
But then maybe also a hypothetical, very rough design of what it would look like with a parklet.
Yeah.
Okay.
Future options.
Yeah, particularly with, like, would it take more parking spaces for a parklet?
Okay, I don't think that all of that wording needs to go into the motion, but
No.
that's what's implied by
Within schematics, yes,
Okay.
right.
Okay, I understand now. I'm ready to vote when.
All in favor?
Aye.
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 Opposed? The motion passes. So we'll reconvene at our next meeting on the 22nd of March and talk about this a little more with more information. Thank you to everybody who participated. Quick question.
I know staff just recommended not sending out new notices, but I know at least 4 businesses on San Pablo that had no idea. The letter you got was because they were told today by those of us who recognize the postcard. So I might suggest sending out new notices if you are interested in having public input.
I would say that just the consultation with the businesses about their parking interest, we should include in that the statement that, yes, we are going to be meeting on March 22nd. So hopefully that can do double
I don't want there to be any
duty.
question about our public outreach efforts, so we'll send a postcard
Okay.
out to everybody.
Yeah.
We don't need that to be a distraction.
No.
Great.
Perfect.
Thank you. Great. Thank you very much, AC Transit, for coming and talking with us and for everybody who participated. We're going to move right along to item number 6.2. This is the 35% response to 35% comments for the San Pablo and Buchanan pedestrian improvement projects.
Just hold on a minute.
Yep, we can certainly hold on a minute. That'll give me a chance to move all these papers around. You want to do analysis? I can do it all the time.
I appreciate that.
Thank you for letting me mention it.
No problem.
Okay. Oh, can we change that?
Take your time, it's fine.
All right.
Looks like you were welcoming back the consultants. Good to see you again.
Hello. Yeah.
Okay. This is the response to 35% comments for the San Pablo Avenue and Buchanan Street pedestrian improvements project. As a background, in November 2017, the Commission received 35% level plans and provided comments for this project. In addition, staff presented the plans to the different committees and commissions and requested feedback from them. At this meeting, the consultant team, BKF, and Parisi Transportation Consultants are here to present the response to comments. We'll have Joseph Young and Andrew Lee and Jason White from the consulting team.
Hi, I'm Joe with BKF. Thank you for listening to us tonight. And so, yeah, pretty much we're going to go over the comments and feedback that you guys gave us at the previous Traffic and Safety Commission. We've had some time to review your comments and come up with some potential solutions and hopefully work. All right, so this is just kind of an overview of the San Pablo Avenue corridor and what we're proposing to do for the project. The project limits are from the city limit, which is on the left-hand side is north for all of our exhibits, and I guess to orient us south is to the right. And so the city limits here is where the project starts and then goes all the way up to the Washington Boulevard split intersection there. We're proposing to do medians down the middle where possible, and then also improving curb ramps by bulbing out or adding signage or flashing beacons to help pedestrians get across, as that's the major concern along this corridor, as there are two schools just east of San Pablo Avenue, and there's a lot of pedestrian traffic through this area. So kind of based on our last meeting, we kind of came up with kind of the top 8, or kind of the 8 items that kind of encompass all your guys' suggestions and comments towards the corridor. One was moving bus stops to the far side of the intersection. We heard quite a bit about that previously, so probably won't go into as much detail into that one. Also adding additional bulb outs along the corridor where feasible, adding additional pedestrian refuges, moving crosswalks to the north sides of intersections as opposed to the south side, adding what the signs and flashing beacons, where they were located relative to where pedestrians are going to stand, and kind of the sizing of those poles to make sure that we're not blocking anyone. We also discussed in length about the Washington Avenue split intersection, as that's a bike boulevard, and getting people on that boulevard across the other side is a challenging task, and in great detail we came up with option number 3 was preferred, and we'll show you that again as we go down the presentation. Items 7 and 8 we're still in coordination with and don't necessarily have solutions at the moment. We are working on those, as we know that number 7, lighting, is an issue along San Pablo Avenue. And so we will look to improve that aspect of it, but we won't go as much into detail of that tonight. And then finding along the corridor to direct people to the best route was another option to promote certain intersections for people to cross. So, as most of you know, one of the biggest issues along the San Pablo Avenue corridor is that there is very limited or even no storm drain infrastructure to capture any of the runoff that's coming to the corridor from any of the side streets or just down San Pablo Avenue in general. So the shaded blue area is an area that we came up with by looking at Google Earth, reviewing the city's GIS system as far as where existing storm drains are, and we came up with about 50 acres of water comes down the side streets or even down just San Pablo Avenue to there. And as you guys know, there's flooding along the corridor. So the main reason we're bringing this up is that when we are proposing to put bulb outs in it, which is a top priority that the commission had recommended, trying to find as many locations at all these intersections to do that. When you're grading those, you create low points. You also create flooding into the street as the spread will increase, since we're reducing that gutter width of the existing gutter width, because I think we have a 7-foot gutter width right now, which is the parking strip, but by pushing out and bulbing out, we reduce it to about a 2-foot gutter. So we're pushing that water even further out into the roadway and making it less safe. So what we would say is that if we do have the funds to do it, or if the grants would allow it, somehow putting in some sort of storm drain infrastructure would open up a lot of doors as far as providing the complete streets project that was kind of outlined by WRT. So based on doing this whole analysis, it would cost almost $90,000 or $1 million to put in a storm drain infrastructure that could handle all of this. Which
you mean
is
900,000?
Sorry, yeah, I'm sorry. Which would be approximately 1/3 of what our original budget was, approximately, to do the improvements. I think at the beginning, with talking with staff, it was about a $3 million number is what they were anticipating to get as far as grants or funds to do these improvements. So this is kind of this will be a reoccurring theme throughout the entire presentation, but is the main issue of why we are limited on bulb outs and everything throughout the corridor. So to some of these slides are existing slides from previous ones, so I'll kind of move through them maybe a little bit more quickly. This is the existing conditions for Brighton and San Pablo. Just to recap, the main issue on this one is that there's conflicts with left-turning vehicles. They have to yield to pedestrians, and we want to try to reduce that conflict with vehicles and pedestrians. So Again, to orient yourself, north is to your left, south is to the right. All the items shown in the blue is the items that we had presented to you guys previously, and all the items in red are items that we have designed or added due to your guys' recommendations and comments. So pretty much on Brighton Avenue, we came up with kind of 4 items based on your guys' comments that seemed important. One was to move the crosswalk to the north side of the intersection. I'm assuming we would still keep the one on the south side, but moving the one to the north side would help prevent that left turn conflict with the pedestrians. So we are able to put put directional ramps on the northeast corner. However, again, due to the limited storm drain infrastructure in the area, we are not able to bulb out due to creating low points and therefore needing to capture that water and direct it somewhere else. So this intersection is actually separate from the previous intersection. You can see that tributary area is from Brighton Avenue down. So we came up with another additional cost to do this. And it's about 600 feet to get down to the next closest catch basin, which is in front of the Center for the Blind where the creek is. That's the closest catch basin, which is 600 linear feet. And based on recent costs that we've gotten back from other projects, that would be another additional $150,000 to $160,000 more dollars to do that section. And therefore limits our options of putting bulb outs into onto this intersection. The third item was putting a pedestrian refuge on either side. That's not feasible due to the 2 left turn lanes at this intersection. So in order to do that, we would have to get rid of one of those left turn lanes, which is probably not the best option. It is something that is, I guess, something that could be possible, but it would have to be studied by our traffic engineer and then also be approved through Caltrans, as Caltrans has the jurisdiction here. And then the fourth one was adding a lead pedestrian phase on the south side. And this would also help in reducing conflicts with vehicles. And one thing I'd like to point out, something that we would have to get confirmation and approval from with Caltrans is these ramps down here on the right side, or on the north side. The existing traffic signal poles would be incorporated into the flare so that they would line up and fit nicely with the intersection. We have done stuff like this in the past projects, and what we have done is move the pedestrian push button up to the landing area, so it would be a separate push button to keep this compliant with Caltrans. But again, it would be something that would have to run by Caltrans and make sure that they're comfortable with that decision. So for the next 2 intersections, Clay and Garfield, there wasn't many comments as far as improvements. It seemed like those were the 2 intersections that seemed to be the most complete and not many comments. So I'll move through those fairly quickly. So this is Clay Street. Didn't really change anything from the last time we met. We were able to get bulb outs on the northwest and northeast side. And again, the south side, it doesn't work due to drainage issues. And then there's Garfield, existing conditions. And so, again, we didn't change much on this one either. It seemed that everyone was pleased with what we had shown before. I would like to point out, as it was mentioned before, the pole sizes and the locations of the poles. We did locate them based on MUTCD standards, as you can see on the right-hand side. So it's at intersections, it's approximately 4 feet from the crosswalk and 2 feet offset from the curb. And the poles will be per city standard detail, and it's about a 1.75 foot or 2-inch, I guess, 2-inch pole size.
So it's a little hard for me to, in particular, to see. But where can you just move the mouse over the spots on the north and south, or east and west?
East and west, yeah.
So that would be up and down.
Yeah.
So where would the pole be on the sidewalk?
Yeah, so it would be right here, one would be here.
Okay.
And one would be here.
I think those poles do not cause visibility obstruction. You
2
were
inches
talking
is not
more
bad, yeah.
about the.
I think it was the beacon was
light
more of the
poles.
concern.
Light poles are in particular, the Hawk signal poles
yeah.
are pretty thick.
Very thick, yes.
Yeah, so this is much different. Thank you.
Castro Street, so this is one of the intersections where we are proposing to move the bus stop from the near side to the far side. And so for Castro Street, again, kind of the main points that we took from the Traffic and Safety Commission, again, was to move the crosswalk from the north side, or from the south side to the north side. So there's a lot of colors here, so I'll kind of explain it. So the light red or pink color crosswalk is one of the options that could be considered. So the northwest corner would stay the same. We wouldn't change that. We can't fit directional ramps in that, so we would just leave the existing ramp as is. And then it was the desire to have a pedestrian refuge at this location, but as you can see with the gray swooping, it's the truck turning, or the fire truck turning is in conflict with a refuge that would be placed there. So it'd be difficult to put one there without having a conflict with truck turning or fire truck turning. And then,
I'm sorry, I don't see that.
oh, the gray, oh, is it?
It's purple, light.
This,
Right.
that's
So
truck turning.
where does it impact the refuge?
Right here.
Oh, I see. Thank you.
Yeah, sorry about that.
That's just light.
And then it was also discussed that this Galvin Appliance driveway is fairly wide for how big the entrance is. So right now it's where this gray line is. I think it's like 30 feet. So we're shrinking it down so we could fit a ramp in this area so that we can have a crosswalk on the north side. And then it was also brought up, option number 2 is the purple. And that would be to put a crosswalk in front of the pet hospital and kind of jog people over to get to the other side, therefore having your pedestrian refuge for people. And then this, again, bulbots were not feasible in this area due to storm drain issues and flooding throughout the corridor. And then moving the bus stop to the far side, it does appear to be feasible. We have 2 existing photos here. There are 2 driveways fairly close to each other in this area. So it was mentioned that you can straddle the driveways a little bit, but we would have to confirm that there is a landing spot there for someone to get off the bus, and we might even, for this business down here, possibly, again, their driveway's fairly long for what their entrance to their business is, shrink it a little bit so that we're able to have a safe spot for someone to sit or come out of the bus.
So you're showing an articulated bus, it looks like.
Yeah, that was just the AC transit detail and how we came up with the spacing that we would need. So we would need 80 feet, so it would be 5 foot from the crosswalk, 60 feet for the bus, and then 15 feet for the pull-out zone.
So, you said that, I think when we talked, we couldn't do a bulb out because of the drainage, is that right? And then we need the taper for the bus to pull out of the bus stop.
Sorry, is it taper? Or sorry?
Yeah, so the 15 feet is basically the distance they need to go
Get
back
out of-
into the.
correct.
Yeah. So the bulb out is not feasible there.
Correct. And to point out, we would also lose approximately 1 to 2 spaces in between the 2 driveways here. It was hard to tell from Google, but it looked like you could maybe fit 2 cars there. There was a Beetle parked there. So I guess it depends on how small your cars are. If it's 2 little fits, maybe they can fit there. And then the existing bus stop happens to be pretty much right next to the intersection. So based on, I think it's 20 feet or 25 feet back from the intersection for parking, you wouldn't have much space to have a parking. So you'd lose a net of 2. And then Portland Avenue, pretty similar to Castro as far as we're going to move the bus stop from the near side to the far side, or propose to move it. This one's seems a little bit more feasible. So the bus stop, previously there's about 70 feet on the near side where the bus stop is, where striped red for the bus stop. We would remove that and propose putting a 20-foot strip of red for, from the intersection back, and then you'd roughly fit 2 to 3 parking spots there, and then you would roughly lose 2 to 3 or 3 to 4 parking spots where the new bus would go. And based on looking at Google and our aerial topo, it seems like it's fairly flat out there, so it seems reasonable that we could potentially make this an option. I guess it just depends on the business owners. And then for the rapid flashing beacon, or I guess not rapid flashing beacon anymore, but just the beacon in general, on previous projects, it's hard to see. So this is kind of our standard detail that we've used on past projects, and it's a 2.5-inch galvanized pipe that the beacon and sign and everything is able to sit on. And as you can see, for this location here, it would sit right here. But then also I did notice there is a existing street light there, so there's a possibility maybe to even place it on there so you don't have to put a new pole. Unfortunately, there's nothing on this side to place it on any kind of existing features, so you would put the beacon here. But the pole is fairly narrow as well.
At what height does the sign start? I couldn't see
7 feet.
Okay, great. I know that's standard.
And then I won't go too into depth in this. We went into it last time. This is option 3 for the Washington Avenue bike boulevard, of getting people from the northwest side to the southeast side of Washington. And I guess if you have questions, Andrew later can answer.
Joe, I think one of the questions, not from this commission, from another commission, was that why don't we just do everything to the north instead of having a south crossing? And if I remember correctly, Parisi responded to that. So I think that was one of the issues, that just basically consolidate all the crossings on one side, on the north side, I think. I think that's one of the comments. And I think you responded saying that the nature of the business will be impacted by the lack of parking that will cause. And this, because the nature of the businesses on the west side is needing less parking, on-street parking. So, and there was another issue with I think that's the main response, if I remember correctly. I should read it, it's right here. If you want to talk about it, that's fine.
The question that I remember responding to was whether we could put the two-way cycle track on the east side of San Pablo, and the businesses on the west side, there's 2 businesses. One's a gas station with a very large driveway and requires no on-street parking, and the business a bit farther to the south is an auto repair shop, and they have some informal parking that they seem to use, and they also seem to park in their driveway, but those are not technically official parking spaces. And in contrast, the businesses on the east side, I think there's 3 or 4, and they're very highly trafficked in terms of pedestrian use and narrower sidewalk and so forth. And that's why we were recommending the design on the west.
Thank you.
And then the last item, there was one comment brought up to look into because we are putting in medians in, as you guys know, along San Pablo Avenue right now, they're all two-way left turn lanes. So we looked into, all right, if we were to put in these medians, is there potential for U-turning? And Parisi's was able to do that. And if from the through lane, you are able to do that, as shown at the bottom image, but if you were in the left turn lane, it would not be feasible to do a U-turn. And that's all that we have for your guys' comments.
Can I just clarify before? So I think if these plans go to Caltrans, we have to really find an alternative for the pedestrian, the rapid flashing beacon. They will not approve it for sure.
Correct.
So I know that the Western Pacific Signal is developing a similar sign that is not the actual rapid flashing beacon, and I don't know if it has also rights, but they're developing something similar, and I don't know if you guys know about that.
No, I don't know.
There's a few other official beacon systems in use by the manufacturers. One's a LED embedded pedestrian crossing warning sign, same diamond sign that you'd get at a RFB with, I think, something like 6 LEDs embedded around the edges. And the manufacturer is also recommending that for those installations that you still space the sign between the down arrow and the warning sign to provide for a gap in case the patent dispute for the RFB gets resolved. You can install a rectangular rapid flashing beacon in its place without moving the rest of the equipment. Because I think it's easier to replace the lights in the RRFB compared to the embedded sign. And then you can just you could keep the embedded sign exactly where it is and just disconnect the power source.
Thank you.
Just so the commission knows, the issue is there's a patent dispute with the rectangular rapid flashing beacon in Caltrans. While this is getting sorted out in the courts, it's not an approved product.
It's not because it's inefficient. It's a great feature, actually, but there is a
Patent dispute. Yeah.
There was one other comment that I wanted to bring up that I remember responding to, which was whether a protected left turn was possible for southbound San Pablo at Brighton. And I took a look at that. We have traffic counts there specifically, and then the FHWA provides guidance for when a protected left turn is warranted based on conflicts between the left turn and the oncoming traffic. And that volume is almost at the threshold that the FHWA lays out on an entire hourly peak hour basis, but the left turn is actually very, very concentrated. It has a very high low peak hour factor, meaning that the traffic is not evenly distributed across the entire hour, but actually is very concentrated within about 45 minutes or so. And so based on that, and also taking a look at the collision patterns at Brighton and San Pablo, there were 2 left-turning vehicle versus pedestrian crashes that occurred in 2012 that resulted in injury, and that is also another good justification for providing a protected left turn. And then I went a step further with that and saw that a protected permitted left turn operation, meaning that you get the left turn arrow to start and then you allow left turns permitted when there's a gap in the opposing northbound traffic, would also serve that intersection well to a greater extent than just providing the protected only. So that is something that I would recommend moving forward with Caltrans in studying that, particularly because of the school demand for that southbound left turn.
But the protected permitted option wouldn't really protect pedestrians, right?
Well, what would happen on the protected permitted is the vast majority of the left turning vehicles would get a green arrow. And then when the green arrow expires, the protected left turn expires, the northbound traffic would get the right of way, and the pedestrians would as well. And sometimes you can flip that order where the northbound traffic goes first and it's permitted, but due to the very high demand for that left turn associated with the school. My analysis was showing that leading with the left turn would probably result in some better operations. I think you're right in that when it's permitted operations, that it has a risk, a greater risk of a left-turning vehicle versus pedestrian crash. But that risk is diminished compared to existing conditions because the vast majority of the traffic would get the left turn, and these left-turning vehicles would not feel as compelled to shoot through the gap knowing that there would be a left turn.
They know
at
they'll
least on
have
the
their
following-
chance if they wait to the next cycle.
Exactly.
Okay.
Did you consider whether a flashing yellow arrow would be desirable during the permissive phase or just go with the standard green ball?
We've done the flashing yellow arrow, and it's shown to be pretty effective. So yeah, I think that's a good design feature to consider.
Okay.
Great.
Yeah. Public comment?
That's my line, but are there any further questions from the commissioners?
Yes. So you have about 4 or 5 questions, but I think we can get through them quickly. So at Brighton, you suggested adding a crosswalk on the north side, but also keeping the crosswalk on the south side. I was assuming when we talked about the north side option that it would be instead of the south side crosswalk, because at other intersections we've chosen north or south, we decide which we think is safer for pedestrians, and we enable that and don't encourage people to use the alternative. Is there a reason here why you would recommend keeping both?
No, I think your recommendation to keep it solely on one side would be beneficial, specifically because you wouldn't have the conflict with Brighton vehicles making that left turn.
Right. I mean, if we think that crossing on the south side is inherently dangerous, it's best to just discourage it rather than leave it. Okay. So your suggestion then would be to use the north side crosswalk and remove the south side?
Yes.
Okay. And in that case, do we still need a leading pedestrian interval at all, or are we okay with just a standard phasing?
That would depend on how much the Brighton right-turning vehicles are encroaching into the crosswalk and how aggressive they are. I think it's also a time of day kind of situation where in the PM, maybe more students walking westbound, and so these right-turning vehicles may be more inclined to yield. But in the morning, when there may be more people walking eastbound, that the leading pedestrian interval may be needed. So it's a matter of programming the signal, and it could be adjusted in the field.
Okay. 'Cause at one point, we were talking about asking for an extremely long leading pedestrian interval to mitigate the safety hazard, but it seems like moving the crosswalk to the north side already cuts the danger quite a bit. So we're no longer in the position of asking for an extreme LPI, but just perhaps a standard one as needed. Okay. Then at Castro, you showed a couple of different options. So one question we had about the straight across option was how that change to the Galvin appliance driveway would affect the business and whether they would be comfortable with reducing their driveway width. Has anyone investigated that with Galvin to find out if they're comfortable with reducing their driveway width as we
No,
proposed?
I'll do so next week.
Okay.
Casual observation
Yeah.
is that they park that parking lot quite heavily with trucks on both sides. They probably need the navigation room to get in and out. That's just my gut feeling.
But as of now, we're keeping both of both the pink-purple options in the plans as possibilities, and we're not settling on one or the other yet? Is that where things stand?
Correct.
Okay, so we're removing the rightmost option there, the blue one, and keeping the two different pinkish ones as possibilities for now until we choose one or the other?
Kind of remember recommending against the leftmost option because
Zigzag.
that stagger positions pedestrian facing away from oncoming traffic.
It staggers the wrong way.
Staggers the wrong way, and it also creates a kind of a surprise situation for somebody making a left turn, for somebody to be in a crosswalk where they're not going to expect it. It's going to be outside of their field of vision. So
if we reject that because it's non-standard and not as safe, and we reject the straight across because of Galvin's needs, then we're back to the south side. So really, all three of these remain as active possibilities depending on future decisions. Is that
As of next week, we'll have an answer, depending on the Galvin appliance.
answer about Galvin? Okay.
There are no supports for this crosswalk other than, I'm sorry, if we leave the crosswalk in the blue, are we planning to support it with any kind of flashing beacons? Or there have been injuries in this crosswalk as well.
I think a flashing beacon could be justified here, yeah. If we go with the south side crossing specifically because it doesn't have the pedestrian refuge. And I think I'll follow up with Joe as well, but there may be opportunities to reduce the width of the crosswalk to pull the thumbnail back, the thumbnail being that right there. Because if we just provide less than the full 10 feet of crosswalk and reduce it down to something like 6, I think we could pull that thumbnail back a little bit.
Out of the gray turning zone, you mean?
Yes, out of the gray path.
So then we actually could have the straight across north side crossing with a refuge.
Yeah, I think that's a possibility.
But it still depends on Galvin.
Yes.
Okay.
I'll get them an answer next week.
Okay.
Right, it may be that if we use a rolled curb instead of full vertical curb, we can address fire department concerns.
That's a good idea, too.
If we were to add another flashing beacon, is there any kind of limit to per square mile, how many they're gonna?
Imagine looking down.
Excellent
San
question.
Pablo.
I
All right,
can't
everybody
tell
push
which
the button.
intersection's flashing. Yeah. All right.
I've kind of found that for flashing beacons, it's not so much how frequent they are, but sometimes we, as traffic engineers, are a little too conservative about how long we leave them on. And so we think of pedestrian clearance times, want to be conservative, leave them flashing, but what happens is the pedestrian vacates the crosswalk and they're still flashing, and then people respect them a whole lot less. And so being a little bit more aggressive on when we turn them off may actually improve how effective they are.
So would that argue for a shorter time span and a button in the middle?
That's, that's a distinct possibility. Yeah, or just separating out the pedestrian activations between one leg versus the other. Although,
So you could go and just stay in the middle and have the flashing beacons go off and enjoy the traffic noises.
actually, I'm going to take that one back.
I'm sorry, I'm
'cause
being
I don't
silly.
want somebody to push one button and thinking that they're going to get the
Yeah,
beacon when it's
yeah,
the
yeah,
right
yeah.
button. So, yeah, probably not.
I think because of these turning radius, it would be really good to have some striping indicating where the cars should go, even if we have road curbs there.
Yeah, I think what I've found is that if you have edge lines, 1 or 2 feet outboard, depending on your scenario, from the raised concrete, cars are much less likely to run into it.
It's easier to follow a line.
Well, it's one more thing that people will shy away from. It's like, oh, I don't want to cross the line. Good, you're not going to hit the concrete. It's subtle, but our protected intersection in Berkeley at Alameda Hopkins, that turned out to be hugely transformative in people following the right path of travel. they would set up too close to the island when they started their turn, and the rear wheel would clip the island every time. But if they started even 2 feet out, suddenly it was easy to make the turn. Now, this is in the middle of the intersection. It's not quite the same thing, but hopefully we can get,
But if you make it easier,
yeah, it's just better guidance.
Yeah, or even reflectors mounted in front, but sometimes on the face of the curb as well. It can be hard to see at night.
my problem with those is I'm looking at it and then I hit it.
I have a few more questions. At Portland, I think you're continuing to show the crosswalk on the south side as we originally planned. There was at one point a discussion of someone asking it to be moved to the north side, and the spreadsheet that we received a few days ago still has a line item recommending moving the crosswalk to the north side and saying that looks feasible, all kinds of discussion about it. Number 17 on the spreadsheet. But I think that the commission expressed a preference to keep it on the south side anyway, and that's what you're showing here. So can we retire line item 17 on the spreadsheet?
Yes.
Okay, good.
So I had a question about the spreadsheet, as long as we're talking about it. I had more time to read the spreadsheet for this meeting than I did for our last glimpse at it. And I didn't quite understand the letters along with the statements. So a B, a response offered as resolution to comment, does that mean that it ends here and nothing will be done in the future with that comment?
It means that there's a possibility of doing what was requested. And a C means that there are some reasons. For instance, the bulb outs that were requested cannot be done unless there's approval to install a storm drain, which is extremely expensive.
So,
But,
so C is essentially,
we're doing.
this is the explanation for, I'm sorry?
Yeah. That's.
C is, we're not going any further with this.
Yeah, we're yeah.
Yeah, and B is, this will be incorporated as much as possible.
Yeah.
What about when there's nothing?
Well, some of them are highlighted in yellow.
Some of them are highlighted in yellow, but for example, number 25.
Oh, right, yeah.
Yeah, yellow's not explained.
It says further evaluation required.
We don't know yet.
Okay.
So I think the B or C will appear at some time in the future.
Well, number 36 is yellow, but it refers to another one and it has a B.
I was going to ask about number 36 as my next question, so.
Protection to pedestrians. And I see comment 52, which is that what Andrew just, is that right?
I think this one was.
52 is really a different question.
Yeah, it's a different question. I
So-
think it was to move the crosswalk.
Yeah, 36 was a request to move the pedestrian crosswalk to the north side of that intersection, and that seems to have been forgotten.
Conflicts with left turns.
It does.
What?
This is already the solution to the Brighton intersection. If we moved it to the other
Yeah.
side, we'd be recreating that problem.
But there is a refuge.
That is true. Yeah, I think if we moved it to the north side, we could provide a refuge there.
And conflict.
And a conflict with.
And a conflict, whereas right now, it's just the right turning conflict, which
Yeah.
is typically less severe.
Yeah, and also I think maybe the refuge is of less importance at a signalized intersection where you're not, pedestrians aren't so much in the position of looking for an opportunity to get across. They're just going.
The whole crossing at once.
Okay.
Right.
All right, so the crosswalk is staying on the south side, then that leaves a concern that Preston brought up about the flow of bicycle traffic around the bulb out. And I'm not sure if the design for the cycle track is far enough along to really see how that would work yet, but
I'm sort of reserving a response to that. I mean, in general, that's a very large corner area, and it doesn't have much in the way of fronting buildings like Solano would, because it's a gas station right now. So I'm not saying it's a perfect solution that the cycle track just winds up at the corner curb area, but it's a relatively wide open area where people would have to navigate around each other, and I suppose some striping or markings would help delineate people to get around and through that area somehow.
So what you're showing is actually that bicycles would ride up the ramp at that point, and
The bicycles and the sidewalk would generally be at the same grade.
at the same grade, okay.
Yeah, and then when they wind up around here, it's a bit of a mixing area, and I didn't go as far as to perhaps show that any sort of crossing area, there would need to be some sort of striping or other indicator signage to say yield to pedestrians or pedestrians have a right of way, but that's.
So you think there's enough room that people can just work it out? Enough room and a low enough number of pedestrians?
As a first take, yes. We could certainly go more, we could be a bit more aggressive with the design, but I would say that there's potential impacts to the right-of-way to that gas station to carve out enough room to channelize the bicycles around and through that corner area. So I think we're going deeper into a design before the facility's been constructed.
Too soon to say?
Yes.
Okay, good answer.
I actually think there'll be a lot of pedestrians at that corner. I mean, I'm a pedestrian at that corner a lot, and so I think that will be mixing. I mean, like, you'll see a bunch of people right there, and they'll have to navigate that.
I think so. I think that Andrew's comment that, we want to sort of use yield to pedestrian types of markings or signage really makes sense to make a clear message to the cyclist. This is a mixing zone. You've got to yield. You got to share the space so they don't try to blast through. Because we don't know if the light's going to be red or green when they're approaching, to cross the street to head west up the hill. So sometimes they're just going to be stopping there anyway. So using it, the mixing zone concept seems the best approach.
Okay, that was my last question. Thank you.
Other questions? I have some questions on the chart or the table for this section. One was on item number 12. This is the Clay and San Pablo signal, which faces north and has a treatment that makes it hard to see from a distance. And when we had our meeting, I remember objecting to this point of view because the lights were designed that way, so it wouldn't interfere with the other intersection. And this says, check in with Caltrans. And I would argue that we don't want to do that.
You don't want to do it?
I think it's fine the way it is. I didn't think there was a consensus that it needed to be changed.
I receive a lot of requests, actually, that they don't see it from far away, and then they're only surprised by the signal. It was designed that way, but this is, when it says it can be requested in the pier, maybe we can request it in the pier if this commission believes that we should. Yes?
I think the concern being that an approaching motorist at the design speed of the roadway doesn't have time to know whether they're stopping or going is a real concern. Yeah, so some people are just going to gamble and assume it's green. That's not a great thing. Now, if the red light's always super visible because it's not the same type, then maybe that's not as big a concern as I think it is. But that would really be the key, is the red light has to always be visible from any angle or distance, or I would consider that a major safety flaw. Not knowing it's green means maybe you're just approaching more cautiously, and that may not be bad, but I'm not I'm one of the people who's not thrilled with the light the way it is, because I
Okay.
feel uncomfortable approaching without knowing what I'm going to be doing.
Aren't the signals coordinated? Are there many situations where I've...
The signals are coordinated, yeah, they
The
are.
signals are coordinated, so
Yeah.
that there aren't many situations.
So maybe that's one of those cases where discomfort's not a bad thing, because it doesn't have a bad outcome opportunity.
That's my take on it.
Okay.
Now, maybe you're turning from Brighton and you can't see the light that you're turning into. Maybe then it's an issue.
Yeah, that's true.
Just a clarifying question for the committee, actually. So this is number 12 about the signal light bulb to LED type. Is that the right? So is this a matter of the luminosity of the light itself, or is it a matter
No,
of the
it's-
program visibility of the visor?
Directionality.
Yeah.
It's a direction, it's a lens that focuses the direction of the signal down.
So it's the program visibility. Okay.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Okay. Then Caltrans has clear standards about that.
they're not going to want to change it.
We're not going to change it. All right.
Leave it alone.
But we can still
We don't need
ask
to
the
discuss
question.
You can ask.
Yeah.
You can ask whether the angle is correct, and they'll probably take a look at it.
It seems to me that is a way to, it is a mechanism so that cars would not speed up when they see two green lights.
Right.
That's basically it.
Yeah, that's right. Yeah.
So maybe it's working.
Maybe it's working. And, but maybe we could ask and see what they think, and if they said no, it's okay.
Do we know of any accidents caused there or anything?
Not related to the light, though.
Okay.
I don't have any data, actually.
Yeah, but typically the program visibility is so that if you get two signals, one behind the other, you don't see the second one and run the red light and blame it on that, right? That's a very good reason to keep it that way.
So we can ask the question, let's see what the reason they give us, and then if not, then
I'm okay with it. Yeah. So my last question in this section is number 20. This is there happens to be a tile store where it appears that the curb cut is being used as a driveway. And it has a C, but the description seems to describe a change that could be made.
And I'm sorry, I put the codes because I'm the one to pay. Maybe I made a mistake, so this is a B.
Sure. Great. Thank you. Okay. So we have the Brighton portion to look at this evening, or not?
Sorry, what was the question?
This is just San Pablo and not,
Because,
Buchanan, you mean?
Buchanan,
Yeah,
correct.
because Buchanan, it's relatively, it's straightforward. It seems that we can accommodate, if you want to go through fast, that's fine, you know.
I don't need to, unless somebody has specific issues.
Buchanan?
I have no concerns personally.
I guess the question is, when we saw this last time, did we make any requests to change the plans along Buchanan? And if we didn't, then there's nothing for the consultants to show
We
us
just
tonight.
made comments about.
We made some minor,
Widening of the curb ramp by the intersection of the USDA and the cycle track.
placement of the poles.
Placement of the poles, which is basically similar to, and by the way, it's poles that are like traffic signal poles or light poles, traffic signal poles in that case. I mean, usually signage is not really obstructing visibility, so, yeah.
I think the purpose of this exercise was to clarify alternatives, and I think the other ones were sort of design development things, so when we get to the next level, we could deal with some of the other questions, but I think what we want to do is like fundamental, is it this way or that way, and get that resolved here.
So tonight is to talk about things that needed more discussion, and things that were just corrections, where the correct answer was obvious, and we all agreed on what to do, don't need to be presented tonight.
So this will allow them to go to the next level of design to answer some of those other questions.
Do we need to take any kind of action? No? Provide comments? So there's some discussion going on over here, so we'll wait a moment. It's not quite as cold as I'd expected it to be, fortunately. I'm sorry, I'm talking about the weather. What else do you do?
So actually,
Yes, yeah, please.
those two lights that we were just talking about, why are they so close together? Is it because there's another pedestrian crossing?
I think it's because of the layout of streets. If you get,
They seem so close.
they are very close. So why is there a stoplight
Yeah.
at, is it Clay?
The second one, yeah. Or the second one going
Yeah, it's
south.
two T intersections with relatively high volume. Theoretically, Clay to Brighton is a continuous path of travel for many people,
Yeah.
so it's just an offset intersection.
Those people that continue to Washington on the Hill, is that what you're saying?
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
Sorry.
Yep. Just want,
Is there anything else
just
you want to ask
curious.
of us? You had a discussion. Do we need, is there anything
We're
you want to?
occupying time.
I'm not asking you what you were discussing. Is there anything else we need to know or you need to know from us? Great. Thank you very much to the consultants for bringing this back to us and
Yeah, thank you.
Iterating.
Thanks.
Thank you for your comments and recommendations.
Thank you. With that, I'd like to move on to item 6. We're still doing it. Item 6.3. If there's something, we could take a break. If you guys need to have a conversation.
This is enough of the night. Thank you very much.
Thank you.
We'll get in touch. All right.
So, 6.3.
Okay, so
Good evening.
so this is a review of traffic calming warrant criteria policy, and this is due to one of the speed surveys that we took last year, I think, and on Curtis or Peralta, between Marine and Solano, and the volume of daily traffic and what the 15% of motorists that go beyond the 25 miles per hour represent. So there is a, just put it here. So what we did is add a new category under special circumstances for residential blocks located adjacent to Solano Avenue and San Pablo Avenue with an ADT of 2,000 vehicles or more. So, and given the fact that if you think about 15% of motorists is about 300 motorists for this daily traffic volume, that will go over 25 miles per hour. And if we assume that most of the motorists will be driving on maybe 12 hours during the day, if not 8, then we have about maybe 25 cars per hour that will go over. So having that threshold, if we have an average daily traffic of 2,000 vehicles per day, the evaluation of the block will be as follows. If the 85th percentile is between 28 and 30 miles per hour, staff would consider implementation of soft speed treatments. And if the 85th percentile speed is less than 28, no changes are implemented in the on the block. And also engineering judgment may supersede specific criteria in this policy. So that's basically the changes that we're suggesting at this point. This is open for discussion. Maybe you want to have a lower threshold, maybe 1,500, but it seems that 2,000 vehicles per day is very reasonable.
Is very what?
Reasonable.
Reasonable.
Mm-hmm.
So before we get into detailed discussion, it looks to me like the proposed recommendation is really no different than what's recommended already.
Well,
which is if the 85th percentile is between 28 and 30, then we use soft treatments. And that's what we did on low volume streets too. So
that's right, yeah.
do we need,
Well, that's right.
I think we would need some different thresholds or different treatments. But actually this is For me, this is not really what I had in mind as our suggested change to the policy. So before we try to fine tune
Yeah.
it too much, let me
And
ask you, do you all, does this match what the rest of you were thinking of, or did you have something different in mind like I did?
Not unless we change the wording somewhat.
Yeah.
Because the idea of, the 2,000 vehicle threshold and saying 15% of that 2,000 is 300 vehicles exceeding, the threshold. If we hold it at that, then as the volume of ADT goes up between 2,000 and 3,000, you don't need any more additional speeders to qualify.
Yeah.
As soon as you've hit that 300, that's, you meet the threshold. So what that means is that for a street with 3,000 vehicles per day, we still only need 300 instead of 450.
Yeah.
So the closer you get to 3,000, the more beneficial that nuance could be if we tailor it that way. So I feel like that falls closer to what you were
Yeah.
envisioning. It's not quite the same, but it at that point means that there's an area in which the threshold is lowered to meet the significance criteria.
Yeah, I guess my preference would be to not use so many like hard cutoff thresholds, but instead have it be more of a graduated way of applying it. And I think the way to achieve that is to stop using percentiles altogether, but just consider the
volume on?
the speed of the top 300 vehicles per day.
Wow, but that's.
Is that measurable?
Sure, I mean, if you have the raw data, I think you could calculate that. So if there are more than 300 people exceeding 30 miles an hour, then we use hard treatments. If there are more than 300 people exceeding 28 miles an hour, we use soft treatments. If there are fewer than 300 people exceeding 28 miles an hour, we do no treatment. But I think we'd have to use a number lower than 300, though. So what I was hoping we would come up with was a way of measuring the impact of speeding on a block that is not using the percentile statistic, because I don't think that's meaningful to the people who live there. I think what's meaningful to the people who live there is how many people are speeding and how fast are they going.
So let's say we changed it instead of percentiles to say
number
100 cars per day going over 30 miles an hour. If you've got 2,000 or 3,000 vehicles per day on the street, that is significantly lowering the threshold as compared to what we have now, and maybe that's the goal. But if you're on a really quiet street, you've only got 100 cars a day, and they're all speeding, and I don't know if that's actually worse.
Yeah, well,
It may be that's fine, they all speed, but you've got the same risk profile, or in fact, if there's lower volumes, less than a high-volume street with the same number of speeders. I can see an argument for it.
How often in the course of a day are you confronted with a nasty speeder?
Right.
I think that's the question.
Right. So regardless how many cars are on the street, how many speeders are you encountering? That could be a very different way to slice this and get to something that from a certain perspective is more equitable.
Yeah, and I think we'd want to adjust the thresholds so that some blocks that used to qualify for treatment no longer do, and some blocks that used to not qualify for treatment now do. But we'd want about the same number of blocks citywide to qualify for treatment. We wanted, because we have a certain amount of funding to do these treatments. We can't suddenly say we're going to do way more treatments.
And you cannot have all speed bumps or soft treatments all over the place.
Right, so it's a matter of prioritizing which blocks are the most affected by this problem. And I guess in my mind, the degree of harm that people suffer when they live on a block with speeders has to do with how many speeders they encounter per day, and maybe it's how many people are going over 30 miles an hour, and we have two different thresholds. If you have 200 people over 30, then you get one treatment. If you have 100 people over 30, you get soft treatments.
But-
Or maybe we have two different speed thresholds, and we take the top 100 speeders, and if they're going over 30, you get hard treatments. If they're going over 28, you get soft treatments.
Well, then we,
But either way, I'm hoping that we keep the number of qualifying blocks throughout the city more or less the same as it is now. And we just shift which ones qualify and which ones don't, to try to get at the worst of the problems.
But I think the only way to figure that out is do a sensitivity analysis looking back at the last, however many years of traffic calming data to find out how many of those applicants that we have had, say in 5 years, would have qualified under the new rules and see, is that more or less? Because then that might change the cutoff. So if we're saying how many cars over 30, does 100 get us the same, or does 100 make 5 times as many streets qualify?
Yeah.
So let's tune that number to find out what gets us to break even on what we're producing, but the theory then being that now we're providing it where there's greater need.
Yeah. So do you have all of the data of, like, the data from the speed surveys over several years, and how many of them we approved?
Do you have an intern to
you guys are
analyze that for
volunteering
you?
to look at it. I mean, I do have a little mini computer that you're welcome to use and count.
I mean, if you have the data, I can probably,
Yeah, I do have the data.
if you just send it to me in CSV, I can probably do the calculation.
I don't know. It's a
Excel?
the thing is that it comes up. It's a software that actually reads that data. I'm going to try. But we need to hire an intern or something like that. No, I mean just.
We'll figure it out.
Okay. I mean,
We'll figure it out, and we'll bring the data out, and
you
whether...
asked for a volunteer, but I would like to volunteer because I can do these. I can do the data processing part of it and try some different thresholds and see if I can come up with something that I think works and
Yeah.
present it to you, present it to the commission, whatever you like.
Promise, I'll give you then.
Okay.
I mean, I'll just throw out there that it's not like a time-sensitive thing. I know you're busy, so, we'd like to adjust this, but there are other things that are more important. Don't let this get in the way.
But this is also important, maybe not to change right now, but to maybe later. Okay, we're going to revise this, and then now we have found that these are the number of,
No, I mean, I really appreciate Harry's volunteering to take it on. Recognize that giving him the data is still taking effort, and I would just ask that we give staff the discretion to figure out when and how that can be done, that we're not, super anxious to do this next month if that's not within the capacity.
and then we leave the policy the way it is right
For
now.
now.
For now.
I'm okay with that. I mean,
Yeah, I'm okay with the policy the way it is until we can really make it better. And I'm not sure that the path that's, I mean, the changes that are shown
Yeah,
in red
basically.
here are not written quite correctly, and we could try to fix them, but my preference would be to try to aim for an even better policy that may take a little more time to develop.
works for me.
Does that work for you?
Great. Well, let's table this until it can be moved forward a little that way.
Is there any privacy issue with providing that data to me?
No, it's time. Basically time. I mean, it's, no, I don't, there's no private
There's
information.
no identifying.
It's not license plates.
No,
No.
it's not a problem. We'll get it to you.
Okay.
What do you say when a resident on a street over 3,000 ADT talks about this?
Yeah.
Or requests this? Do you have a set thing that you say?
Yes. I think Pierce Street is one perfect example.
I think so.
We're
Susan can't
verging.
talk about
No,
Let's talk about another street.
Well, no, yeah, some other street, but in this
It's the one that I remember, but
policy-
not Pierce.
Or-
It's once I have a street, yeah.
Okay, good. So that street, if the person on that street asks, what what does the city say? Because isn't that part, that, because they're going to ask, they don't know, so do
Not
we,
eligible for traffic calming.
it's just not
Well,
because of the quantity?
There are several issues. There are other features that we can implement, like study if there is a stop sign warrant and is met. We can actually do that.
So they can still ask under
You can still
this?
ask. Maybe if it's a bus route, it's more challenging in the sense that you cannot really just freely say, okay, we're going to have speed humps, even though even it's more than 3,000. But then there is raised crosswalks that are softer, vertical, differentials.
So it's, yeah, okay.
So there is hope.
Yeah.
So it's a soft no.
It's a
It's a
soft
soft no, but basically typical traffic calming like this, speed humps and maybe the soft treatments are an option, and a raised crosswalk, stop sign, high visibility crosswalks with yield signs. Maybe I used to recommend, and I really like still, is the rectangular rapid flashing beacon. It's a great feature, and it actually slows traffic. I mean, the yield rate is very high. Hopefully, the Federal Highway Administration continues with it, and these lawsuits are solved.
Yeah.
But that's
Good.
Okay, moving on to item 7, announcements and communication. And we're going to start with 7.1, an update on the I-80 Gilman Interchange project presentation recently at the business owners meeting and Albany City Council earlier this week.
I think several of you were at the city council meeting, so I'll keep this short, but if you want to go into an extended discussion, that's great, of course. So we have received, there were 2 public meetings in Albany in the last few weeks, one early in February during the day with a particular outreach to businesses in Albany and Berkeley potentially affected by the project. And then second, on Tuesday evening, the Alameda County Transportation Commission and staff, commission staff and consultants made a presentation to the City Council. The project is, as you see on the screen, and to refresh your memory, it's 2 roundabouts on either side of Interstate 80, with 2 different alternatives being explored for a pedestrian and bicycle overcrossing from the freeway. I think the general direction that the project is going for the pedestrian overcrossing is shown on the screen, with the southern overcrossing option, and not shown on this particular graphic, but there's a lot of work going on to improve the bicycle connection from Cordneses Creek and the soccer fields area to Gilman, and then on to either the overcrossing or underneath the freeway on the shared use bike and pedestrian paths that would be available for surface crossing under the freeway. So the design environmental process is proceeding in 2018, and I think the idea would be that it would be, the design would be completed and the project beginning in later 2019 or 2020 timeframe. Be happy to go into more details if there's anything particular people are interested in, but again, I'm trying not to be repetitive for those of you who've been tracking.
Susan, I don't know if you've been at the recent presentations at all.
No, I have not.
The other 3 of us have, we go from a reasonable level of understanding to a very high level of understanding next to me here. But we'd love to hear your questions.
Yeah, considering, so what's happening on the East Shore access to Target and
Let me get to a better graphic of that, because that is one of the changes for automobile circulation. What is proposed due to the anticipated traffic operations and safety considerations, and there are a variety of them, but but one of the most significant is that the railroad tracks back between 2nd and 4th Street are a major safety issue, and we can't have traffic backing up on Gilman into the railroad tracks. That's a high risk. So if we were to, the proposed design that's on the screen eliminates the ability to go westbound on Gilman and make a right turn onto East Shore Highway. And the reason for that is if that movement combines with the people who are trying to get on the freeway or the people who are trying to get through to the other side to ball fields, if they all get into that area all at once, there's congestion, it backs up and starts to, first blocks the Second Street intersection and then potentially blocks railroad tracks. So if you're that motorist coming down Gilman, you're going to Target or Lumber Liquidate or whatever, you would make a right turn on 2nd Street and then a left turn on Harrison, which is just right out of the image here, and then connect onto the East Shore Highway. And as part of the project, that there would be improved signage and street striping and pavement treatment so that 2nd Street, which is now, it's not, it's the route to the Berkeley transfer station and to some storage facilities. It's not a glamorous street.
No.
It won't be a glamorous street by the time we're done, but it would be better than it is. With at least some signage that directs people to.
Jeff's request for rebuilding the Berkeley transfer station.
Yeah, which is part of the problem, a future project for the city.
That actually is going to happen.
Wow.
But Jeff's right. The streetscape enhancements are a significant goal of the project that it intends to repave and do some other things.
So, and then the bicycle crossing the yellow, so that's not flushed out though, correct? That's not part of, or it's getting closer or?
Yeah, I mean.
It's pretty fleshed out. The bridge itself, that southern overcrossing is pretty straightforward. The tricky part has been
getting
Gilman. And let me see if there's a good graphic. Sorry, there's a lot of graphics in here.
There you go.
That's as good as anything as a starting point. So if you're at the soccer fields over by Cornices Creek, you would come over by 5th Street, jog over on Harrison, come in on 4th Street. These are pretty low volume bicycle boulevard types of streets. It would be a fairly comfortable bike ride. This would be a new signal at Gilman and 4th. And then you would get on a cycle track, in this example, on the south side of Gilman Street, and you would travel along over the railroad tracks. This intersection here is particularly tricky, and it's still a little bit of a work in progress because there's lots going on with motorists going, in this case, it's one way on 2nd Street to the north, and it's going to also be one way the other direction to the south. A fair number of trucks, and at least the traffic models are projecting a fairly high volume of traffic. So this is a tricky intersection, but then again, as you're a bicyclist, you get across that, and then you would be, it would be easy to get to the intersection itself. You'd do one crossing here of what's a one-way East Shore Highway. This first crossing there is East Shore Highway going into the roundabout, so you just have to look to your left, and then you'd be clear to get onto the start of the bridge, which is that little yellow segment at the bottom of the screen.
May I?
Yes.
So, the project manager has bent over backwards to engage with active transportation people in the area, especially the strollers and rollers. And a lot of improvements have been added to this project to make the southern crossing more palatable, especially this crossing here and the things connecting to Carneses Creek and also to areas within Berkeley to the south. This would be actually a scramble phase light for pedestrian and bicyclists. So that makes it a lot easier to get across without any traffic interfering. This is sort of the remaining sticking point, how to improve this area so that it's safer. But, you know, if that Second Street Southern crossing can be managed and figured out, the strollers and rollers are pretty close to saying that the Southern crossing is okay.
Yeah, a lot of the things there for the southern crossing of Second Street, as Jeff mentioned, reducing it to one-way southbound, reducing it to one lane, so there's only one lane to cross. Berkeley's Transportation Commissioner, who's participating in this, Karen Perolik, pointed out if we can eliminate the westbound left turns to southbound, so that the only movement you're conflicting with is the right turns from Gilman. So we're kind of channelizing it to sort of tilt the approach and all sorts of things so that you can't make left turns in. It's becoming a much lower stress crossing, and that's the critical goal. We established that, you know, on the scale of 1 to 4 of level of traffic stress, where 1 and 2 are low stress, 3 and 4 are high stress, everything from the creek to the pedestrian overcrossing has to be a 2 or better. So it should all be comfortable, low stress, because that's what captures the vast majority of cyclists' comfort level. And so we're refining and tweaking. So it's great. You know, I think Jeff's input's been really good on this as well.
It's taken a lot of work and will continue to. And I just want to say the original vision that I think Albany had for a northern overcrossing was a good one. It was the details got tricky. And it not only is it a longer bridge overcrossing, but particularly in this area up here, if the bridge started here and went to the north and across, one of the big issues would be the impact on this particular property, this Ready Arc, which is an industrial property, which would add cost and complexity. The property would have to be acquired by the project, which would add cost and complexity and time and expense. So at a certain point, there's a cost-benefit analysis that really has to be done. And you know, is it worth, if we can make the more practical southern overcrossing work, is it overall for the Alameda County Transportation Commission and Caltrans in the two cities, from a cost-benefit perspective, it'd probably be better. But that original vision of being able to have a crossing on the north side, and maybe someday we could build another, we can connect to it ourselves directly from Cordonices Creek or someplace else, that was a great vision. It's in the ATP, it's in the general plan, a few other places. It's just details hung us up.
But I think it triggered a lot of really good thought.
It did.
I mean, you know, right down to, you know, Preston tends to come with a lot of grand visions and ideas, and the moment that I felt like we, you know, had really hit a success from a certain perspective was when the project's bicycle and pedestrian consultant came up with an even grander vision than Preston's, which was to raise the railroad tracks so that everything could cross under the railroad tracks at grade, just flat. You could drive through on Gilman, you could, you know, walk through next to the creek. You know, now, whether or not that is viable or feasible, just the...
How far south would you do that? Because you guys have had problems with people dying on the tracks.
You'd start at Buchanan, you'd slope up at 1%, so you get up to 10 or 15 feet here, which if the roadway dips down, the sidewalk can continue level. But then, yeah, it's how many crossings down do you go? You get your quiet zone, so, you know, we can sleep at night and, you know, not hear as many train horns. You know, again, not precisely part of the project.
I was thinking trench. That's fabulous. Yeah.
Well, that's what the concepts in the past have been, and I thought this, you don't have to go as far up as you would have to go down. It's again one of those things of the vehicles need less clearance than the train needs. It was just creative thinking. It's not that that's, you know, the end all be all solution, but just the openness to concepts and really thinking about it and what's a different way to solve this problem was great. You know, and you know, to the extent that we got the more practical, enhance the bike boulevard connection between the creek and a signal at 4th and Gilman. Like, okay, we're still getting the result that we need, which is a low stress connection. So it's been a very good and productive process.
As a representative of strollers and rollers, I would like to thank you as a person who's employed by the city of Berkeley for Berkeley's forbearance in allowing this process to continue this fall while you're waiting for this long-delayed project to come to fruition.
Well,
and that is appreciated as well. And of course, the participation of the city staff as well. But Berkeley in particular has been waiting for this intersection to be improved. Right. So thank you.
That was like one of my number one priorities when I started the job 10 years ago.
Well, I thank you because I'm going to be back working down in that area. So once it's built,
good.
It's going to be right in my backyard. I like it. I'll use it. No, it looks great. Good work.
So that kind of nullifies the only question I had, which maybe we take offline, but in the redesign of your transfer station, are you considering land that would be needed for a pass-through under the railroad tracks on Gilman?
On Gilman, the expectation right now within Berkeley's strategic transportation plan, a grade separation of Gilman and the railroad tracks is included. It's in the Alameda County countywide transportation plan for part of the 30-year funding vision. It's not as yet in the 5-year plan that they maintain, the CIP. But the concept there would be for the roadway to dip under the railroad. Because again, as I said, you need less clearance for vehicles than you need for trains. So the vertical difference would be less, and you can get back up to grade basically between 4th and 2nd. At 4th, you start to go down. At 2nd, you come back up, you're done. If the road went over, we'd be starting east of 4th and ending west of 2nd, which means both of those intersections would either be cut off, which I don't think we can do, or you're elevating both of those roadways to come up to an elevated bridge structure, and now you've got this big spider web of elevated roadways that I don't think is feasible. Well, that'd be very difficult.
Very interesting answer. Let me rephrase my question.
For the pedestrians?
Not necessarily. I'm trying to picture how you use the current corridor to create that. And would you have to take property next to it? I guess is my real question.
Yeah, you'd lose the driveway access. So the transfer station, taking the easiest one, has driveways onto Gilman.
Right.
With the railroad grade separation, those would have to go away. So the transfer station redesign should account for how do you then replace all of that access off of 2nd Street.
Okay. But you're not taking significant amounts of land on either side of the street.
No, it should all be able to happen within the public right-of-way. The question of how do you maintain local access.
I'm going to stop you there because
thank
you for indulging my question. And it's almost 10 o'clock. And can I get a motion to continue the meeting? I think we have the update. We need to talk about future agenda items, and there might be one other item.
I think there's one other announcement.
Yeah.
Okay, so let's close item 7.1, if that's acceptable to the commissioners. Thank you for your questions. And I have a in-passing announcement, which we might as well stick in here.
Let's get our motion to continue.
What do we need, 5
motion
minutes
to continue,
more?
yeah.
Motion to continue till 10:15.
Second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye. I just wanted to note that Portland recently passed a 20-mile-per-hour on residential street ordinance.
Oh.
That's not in the state of California, but it can be done. Thank you.
Everybody's going to qualify for traffic calming.
Yeah.
Great, Mark.
Jeff, would you like to introduce the next item?
I'll let Elena introduce the next item.
Okay.
You gotta switch the.
Oh, here. Oh, yeah. You mentioned first. All right, so some of you know that this is going to be my last traffic and safety meeting, and that I'm leaving Albany after 11 years and 8 months. And just want to thank you for everything and for your leadership. And why don't you continue?
While I have a chance, I want to thank Aleda here at the commission, and I'll do it many other times in the next few weeks. But as you know, I don't need to say anything about her energy, enthusiasm, and intelligence and success in doing projects. And she's prepared a PowerPoint of some of the things that she's worked on, and I'm a little afraid how long it's going to be. Because she is a one-person transportation project generation machine. And I wish she could construct them herself too. But I'd like, if you want me to go through it, I will. But I know you're a strong woman. You can get through this. So, and I know if I start talking, you'll stop me and correct me.
Not this time.
Why don't you go ahead and I can jump in if
Okay. Well, I started, my first project was closing out the Buchanan alternate path, and as you can see, some people were in the council, were council members and different traffic and safety commission, and you can see Commissioner Farid Javandel with a little toddler here. So,
wow.
You remember?
Yeah,
So 2006, 2006, now when we see the kids actually being teenagers, it seems that time has passed. So this was the ribbon cutting ceremony. And after that, it was a list of projects that we worked together, and you provided leadership and support for grant applications. Here is a list. I don't want to read them, but you know them, and plans and programs. And there is a little scrolling that is coming up with the projects. And now I'm not going to do anything, just have fun with them. I've been thinking about those as I prepare to leave.
I'd like to jump in and in particular note that the Safe Routes to Schools programs that she's done, the intersection improvements she's made for all of our schools. This is a youth-oriented community, and safety of our kids are paramount, and she's accomplished an enormous amount towards achieving that safety so our kids can walk and bike safely to school.
Well, we still, no project is perfect, and we still have to improve, but I think after $5.5 million in grant funds, which just seems maybe not too much for cities like maybe Berkeley or San Francisco, when you think about one person administering this.
Per staff, that's spectacular.
Yeah,
Amazing. That's amazing.
It's about between 65 and 75% of the total project costs.
That's
as
great.
a whole. So there is a list that I think Mark and Jeff are not going to like here. It's for them to complete, and you. The next step is complete the design and implement phase 4 of the Buchanan Pikeway. We got a Measure B grant administered by Alameda County Transportation Commission. So
We have to turn our reports in on time.
yes. So close the gap between the cycle track at UC Village development and the Marine San Pablo intersection. Request for experimentation to the Federal Highway Administration to implement bicycle accommodation at the new Hawk, Dartmouth and San Pablo. And finish the plans for San Pablo and the Buchanan pedestrian improvements, which you had the opportunity to see tonight at 35% level with the changes. We'll start and complete the Solano Avenue Complete Streets conceptual plan, and the design and procure funding for the update of the Masonic Marine and Masonic Solano traffic signals with protected left turns, basically to protect the bicyclists, and pedestrians crossing Marine and Solano at the Ohlone Greenway. And the last thing is that work on an alignment for the Cerrito Creek bicycle facility. And with that, I want to thank you again for the opportunity to serve you and to serve Albany. And you are in great hands. You have the talents of Jeff Vaughn and Mark Hurley. They're great people to work with. And
just want to say goodbye and also thank Ann Cheney, former community development, for hiring me.
Thanks, Aleda.
Actually, I want to say one thing, being the new kid around, Aleda, you see the impact of Aleda's work all through the city, and the one thing we're working on right now is the CIP, which you think wouldn't be all that interesting. But one of the things you see is over 50% of our work is transportation related, and it's all driven from plans that Aleda put together, projects and initiatives she's put in play. So she's leaving us now, but her fingerprints are going to be all over the city for a long, long time, and we have at least 5 more years of projects that have her, the origins and things that Aleda has done. And she's been an absolute joy to work with, and introducing me to the city and so forth. So it's been wonderful.
And if I just may continue to not embarrass Aleda, but torture her maybe a little bit. And then this will be my last comment about it. I particularly appreciate her knowledge and her technical capabilities. And she would come to me sometimes and say, just trust me. And I'm a kind of, I don't always respond well when someone says that, but when she says that, I completely trust her. And if she says, this is not going to work, she's always right. Or it will work, trust me, she's always right. And that is a special skill. That is really very special, and I appreciate that, Aleda.
Thank you. Thank you again. Thank you. Thank you very much.
You start.
Okay.
I'm speechless. No.
We've worked together for a long time, and I too really appreciate your energy and your enthusiasm. And it has shown through in all the projects that are started and ongoing. I want to particularly say that the Marin Buchanan corridor and active transportation improvements, we now have almost. We'll be getting soon, and with Phase 4, we'll complete a corridor from the Bay Trail to the hills that's pretty unique in the East Bay. And I think it's quite fabulous. And thank you, among other things.
I just want to say I've been, just dawned on me, messing around with transportation in Albany for 20 years now. First as a consultant, then in other roles. And the timing struck me here that, for a while, the biggest success that I could point to that I had any help, pushing along was the Just Paint solution of the Marin Road Diet. But all the cool stuff, all the concrete, all the really impressive stuff has happened since Aleda got here. So thank you.
You want to go?
Well, when it comes to grants, I feel like I have no idea what's going on, and I've just been so appreciative that I can completely trust that if there's money to be found to do a project, Aleda will find it, and none of us have to think about how that's going to work. We just know if she says we can't do it, it's because she tried everything, and usually it works when she tries it. And as far as technical design things, it's been really wonderful to be able to come up with wacky ideas and have you just look at them and see right through to what's going to work and what's not. You don't seem to be constrained by preconceived ideas of what's proper. It's like everything is just very straight through and direct, and I really appreciated that.
This has been a great experience. I really enjoy my ride here. It's been great. I really enjoyed the community, and the Traffic and Safety Commission has been completely wonderful to all of us. And work doesn't feel like work, honestly.
So, transition. He's
I'll
not
go that
agreeing.
You might wonder why I accomplished so much, because I barely sleep.
Yeah, I believe that. Transitions are, everybody has transitions all the time, but some are pretty notable, and this one I would count as a pretty significant transition for Albany, and for me personally, it was like, what is this commission that Peggy Thompson's like, please get on this commission? I'm like, what? But you've been so supportive and gracious, and all of these other technical things that you are, like, with no question. I think we're extremely lucky to have had you, and we're also extremely lucky that you get to go on and be, It's amazing.
Not sleeping is not good, so hopefully the next person will have some rest.
Yes, that's right.
It's in my style of working, basically. That's just wanted to put things on the street. And it's not the best thing. I mean, but it's been fun.
I just want to circle back to Safe Routes to School, because I've also been intimately involved with that. And Aleda kept coming up with money, and we've had this program where 4th and 5th graders get educated in cycling. And it turns out that's really unique. It's not something that's happening really much of anywhere else in Alameda County currently. Hopefully they're implementing some of that. But we have kids in our community who are trained to cycle safely like nowhere else. And it's not a cheap program, and it's been going for 7 or 8 years, at least.
It's funded by the Alameda County Commission. The thing that is unique is that we have the matching funds. Every time there is a Safer School infrastructure, I request the 10% for educational purposes, and that's more work. So that's something that...
Yes, it is more work. Thank you.
Yeah, so something that I just basically took as a commitment. I mean, that's why Transform wanted to do it more often, but it's a burden on staff, and we have other priorities as well.
That's part of why my kids are able to ride their bikes to school. I mean, not just the facilities, but the training.
Mm-hmm.
I'm a cycling instructor. My daughter refused to ride a bike between training wheels and 5th grade. Then the weekend before she was going to have the instruction, she agreed to go to the playground with me because she didn't want to be embarrassed that she didn't know how to ride a bike. So, it got my obstinate daughter back on the bike and trained both of my kids in how to ride safely to middle school.
Yeah,
so
that's amazing. So you can sleep.
Yes.
You guys have more work for me in the next 2 weeks. In addition to it, sending everything to everybody, we have to do some counts. I'm looking very good.
So we have a number of future agenda items we talked about at our next meeting, specifically coming back to the movement of the bus stop that we addressed tonight. And there are other things going on here as well. So hearing no discussion, I'm going to close the meeting with a thank you, resounding thank you to Aleda for her years of service, and echoing that her influence and projects will live on for years. Mm-hmm. Thank you, Aleda. And good
Thank
night.
you, Aleda.
Thank you.
Thanks.